There's a tornado right there. Guys, everybody go.
The wind started howling, and you could hear the roar coming.
Looks like a 5,000-pound bomb hit the middle of town and blew up.
Holy get it done! Oh my God!
This is an emergency. You go to a safe place right now.
I knew the direction it was heading, and I knew my baby was in that path.
Oh my God! Oh!
As temperatures rise all around the globe, natural disasters are becoming more violent and more frequent. Extreme weather survivors have captured the intensity and the magnitude of these events. These are first-hand accounts of a planet gone rogue. April 27th, 2011 was the worst day on record in Alabama. 62 tornadoes touched ground and 252 people died in less than 24 hours. James Spann spent most of that day on live TV, trying to save lives.
Get away from the door!
The most important part of my job is to provide adequate warning for storms that can kill people. And if we're not successful at that, we're not successful at anything.
At 5:40 a.m., James Spann joins his colleague, Jason Simpson, who's been on the air since 3:30 a.m.
I want to show you this from the graphic system. The Storm Prediction Center has placed Alabama in a high risk of severe weather today.
We all knew it was going to be bad. It's going to be one of the worst severe weather days that we'd ever seen.
We've got James Spann.
Thank you very much. When he walked in the door, for me, there was a feeling of comfort because I knew I wasn't going to keep fighting this fire alone.
In addition to radar and satellite data, Spann and Simpson rely on professional storm spotters to provide what they call ground truth.
We were one of several teams that worked for James Spann at his TV station. So our job is to find storms in northwest Alabama, and when they start happening, to give visual confirmation.
45 years in the weather business, and I've never seen a tornado, and somehow or other, I just had this knowledge that I was going to see one on this day.
Brian and Tim meet in the city of Jasper, an hour northwest of Birmingham, where Spann's TV station is located.
Around 2 p.m., we notice an odd-looking cloud approaching us.
Brian, is that a rain-free base over there, sir?
I was just trying to decide that.
I mean, this storm looks so weak on radar, it doesn't even seem possible.
Doesn't look like much at all. Lo and behold, it comes over us, and as it comes over us, we see that telltale sign, a rain-free base and a wall cloud, and in addition to that, the wall cloud is rotating.
I see rotation. I see rotation. Check it out, Brian.
Yep.
Rotation. We have rotation.
It takes a severe thunderstorm to make a tornado. If wind shear causes the mid-levels of a thunderstorm to rotate, a mesocyclone is formed. And if the rotating winds then descend to the ground, the result is a tornado.
Where's the cell phone?
Tim places a call to the National Weather Service and informs them of what we're seeing as storm spotters.
This is Tim Coleman. I am on Highway 78, just west of Jasper, and I'm watching a rotating wall cloud. That creature's coming right at us. I got to get back in the truck.
They immediately issued a tornado warning.
This is an urgent message. This is a tornado emergency for the city of Coleman.
Lauren Minot was aware of the tornado warning when she left her house and headed to work in downtown Coleman. But for Lauren and most people who've grown up in the area, tornadoes and tornado warnings are just a routine part of life in rural Alabama.
I had the radio on, but I wasn't really paying attention to the weather until it beeped really loud and said there was a tornado in South Coleman County.
The National Weather Service in Huntsville has issued a tornado warning for extreme southeastern Madison County in north central Alabama, southwestern Jackson County in northeast Alabama.
I get just about in town, and I'm looking around because they're still saying that there's a tornado. And finally I see it.
Our store best car.
Oh my God.
Better prices every day.
Holy crap. At this point, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I have to get out of here. So I turn around thinking that I'm gonna have time to get out the way.
Friday, April 29th is the final day to shop the Willow Tree Hotel.
And it hits me. It sounds like someone is throwing rocks at my car. And at this point, I feel like I'm being lifted up because I had that weird feeling in my stomach. You know, like when you're riding a roller coaster.
The tornado scooped up the car and dropped it in a parking lot next to the road. Fortunately, Lauren escaped without injury, even though she ignored all the warnings.
In 2011, about 80% of all tornado warnings were false. A warning was issued, nothing happened at your house. And after repeated warnings like that, where nothing happens, it's cry wolf, the boy that cried wolf. And we know that people seek confirmation when they hear a warning. They believe it when they see it. They turned on the television, and we had the live stream of the tornado. There it is.
And again, this is coming right through the middle of downtown Cullman. You can see the debris.
The live streaming images broadcast on TV left no doubt in Kim Cross's mind that this storm was dangerous and deadly. She's a journalist and longtime Alabama resident.
When we first saw Cullman on TV, you get this terrible feeling in the pit of your stomach. You think, my God, people could be dying. I'm watching on TV as people are dying. You know, I grew up with tornadoes. I remember being in first grade and having to do tornado turtle, where you get down in the hallway and put your, crawl up in a ball and you put your hands over your head and protect your head.
The tornado turtle is a leftover from a nuclear bomb awareness film dating back to the Cold War era. And the air raid sirens, many installed during World War II, are no match for the deafening roar of a tornado.
You might hear a siren on a calm day with no storm, but during a raging thunderstorm that is 65,000 feet tall, with a tornado and driving rain, in unbelievable thunder, you can't hear a siren. They're worthless. But if they see a tornado live on television, then they will do something.
The Cullman tornado was an EF4. EF stands for Enhanced Fujita, a scale which classifies tornadoes from 0 to 5 depending on the wind speeds and the damage they inflict. The Cullman EF4 stayed on the ground for more than 65 kilometers, and close on its heels, an EF5 tornado slammed into the city of Hackleburg.
So if you have family that live in Lawrence County, up around Moulton and Hatton, call them now. Let them know that there's a large, violent tornado on the ground moving across Lawrence County.
After it flattened a Wrangler jeans factory, the EF5 continued northeast, headed straight towards Carrie Kirby and her family and friends.
The last thing they said on TV before we lost power was it just hit Phil Campbell. It's headed towards Mount Hope. If you're in the path of Mount Hope, get out. So we got in the truck and came down here and got in. And it was bad.
It was bad.
Carrie's neighbor, Billy Little, is a chicken farmer. Just a few hours before the twister hit, Billy saw Carrie and her husband Hal in town and invited them to ride out the storm in his cinder block shelter.
You know, it was real black back in there. You know, it's just a black cloud. But yet I was looking back in there over in woods, and the tornado was drawing that energy, and it was clouds. I mean, big clouds just rushing towards it. You know, it looked like it was doing 200-300 miles an hour. You could see a wall of rain and stuff moving
I saw
that way.
Black and gray mist looking that it was rolling in front of that wall.
Hail the size of golf balls started dropping from the sky, the telltale sign of the cold front that fueled the twister.
Then me and Billy were looking at the balls of ice, and one hit you on the hand, didn't it?
It hit me on the hand, and my son, he was running, and one hit him on the head before he could get in there.
and then I could see gray smoke just rolling towards us. And that scared me to death when I saw that. So I got back in the shelter and sat down, and I was silently praying they would hurry up and get in the shelter and close that door.
Hey, it's coming right over us. Yeah, I ain't never seen nothing like this. Hey, look at that, boy, it's getting dark. Look here, Lord, have mercy. I ain't never seen nothing like this.
When they got the door shut, it didn't last but 30 seconds of quiet before we could start hearing the tornado coming, and it sounded like a jet airplane to me.
There's that train. Yeah.
And it just kept getting louder and louder and louder. And then we could start seeing mud and pieces of leaves and trash being thrown up under the door into the shelter with us.
The tornado does not let up, and there's not much to do but hunker down and pray. One of the deadliest super outbreaks in the history of the United States has unleashed a rash of violent tornadoes on the towns and farmlands of Alabama. For the unlucky victims, it seems as if the entire planet has suddenly gone rogue.
Holy crap!
Carrie and her friends find shelter in a bunker to escape an EF5 tornado headed straight for them.
I just was hoping that the roof would stay on and the door would stay shut.
Timmy, it's out on top of us.
Don't open the door yet, please! Don't open the door yet, please!
When the terrifying sound of 320 kilometer-an-hour winds and flying debris finally subside, some of the men try to exit the shelter.
Power line just blowed over the door here.
Well, over our door right here?
Over that door. We stuck.
They're alive and well, but there's no telling what devastation lies beyond that door, or how long they'll be stuck inside. Finished with Mount Hope, the violent long-track EF5 tornado plowed through several more rural towns, leaving behind a wake of destruction over 210 kilometers long, with 72 people dead. But there was more to come, as storm spotters Brian Peters and Tim Coleman would soon discover.
Doppler radar showed this tornado moving northeast at 55 miles per hour.
We hear the emergency broadcast system, that sound that is so unmistakable. It starts listing off times, and it tells us this large tornado will be in Cordova at 4:55 p.m.
The tornado will be near Jasper and Cordova around 4:55 p.m. Central Daylight Time.
Tim's radar application shows two massive thunderstorms, both capable of producing tornadoes. But radar doesn't tell the whole story.
A lot of people think the radar beam just magically hugs the surface of the Earth. It doesn't work that way. Radar goes in a straight line. The Earth curves. So as you get a distance from the radar site, the beam is higher and higher and higher. So in some cases, at a distance from that radar site, your beam might be 5,000 feet off the ground. So we know there's violent circulation 5,000 feet off the ground. We don't know if it's at the surface. And the only way we know that, it's trained spotters.
Tim and Brian are both professional meteorologists. They've studied enough tornadoes to know that what makes them so dangerous is their unpredictability. They know that without warning, a tornado can change direction, turn back on you, or appear when you least expect it. That's why a trained storm spotter never stops evaluating and reevaluating the risk.
We decided, well, let's go for it. And if it becomes too dangerous, we'll stop. So we began to head south.
All right, this will take us straight down to the interstate. We're going to try to intercept a massive supercell with a dangerous tornado that's currently in Pickens County.
We get on Interstate 22 around 4:20 p.m. We know the tornado is back there. We cannot see it because we are in extremely heavy rain. At this point, we realize we can catch this tornado, but we're going to have to drive through the northeast edge of the storm right out in front of the tornado, get south of it so we can see it. So it's a very risky maneuver.
But we're driving into the core now. I don't even think we can do much more.
Just heavy rain.
Given the fact that we now are going to cross directly in the path of the likely tornado, I'm becoming apprehensive about continuing on this journey.
I mean, I don't know, Brian. I just don't want to die. You know? I don't want to die either.
We can do it.
The rain starts letting up and we're seeing a little bit of brighter sky ahead. We knew that when you start getting into that bright area, that's where the tornado is going to be.
Oh, shit. There's hail.
We're going at speeds close to 90 miles per hour. A few hailstones start hitting the car.
Oh, damn. I hear hail.
Oh.
We counted at least 9 bangs as large hail begins to hit my vehicle. They were at least golf ball size.
So we want to get under the overpass. We're getting hail.
Oh, I mean, we're directly in the path of the tornado now.
Brian then starts asking me, should we stop? And I said, no, we cannot stop here. We are directly in the path of the tornado. If we stop here now, we will die.
Just haul ass.
You got a good view coming up right here.
There's the tornado. Okay.
Oh my God, it's there.
I see it. Just keep back, keep driving. Drive. Just keep driving, man, because it's coming at us. Where's my phone? Let me have my phone. Drive.
My first thought was, I need to call James Spann at ABC 3340.
This is Brian Peters. Can you patch me through to James?
My second thought was, it's happening. After 45 years in the field of meteorology, I'm finally seeing a real tornado.
I'm on I-22 and we've got the tornado in sight.
There it is, Brian. My voice goes up an octave. There it is, Brian. So at that point, we stop.
I'm stopping on the interstate to give James a play-by-play of what we can see from our vantage
We can't
point.
stay here long.
I know it.
Multiple vortex tornado.
And there it is. Not a wall cloud, not a rain-free base, a full-fledged tornado.
We got Brian Peters on the line with us. Brian, you're seeing a tornado right now. Tell us what you've got.
Yes, James, we're about a mile from Cordova, exit 72. But I want to tell you right now, it's actually coming in our direction. So we're not going to be able to stay here very long.
Hey, Brian, you get out of there. I mean, if you got to hang up, you go. But have you noticed any debris falling out of the sky?
There's definitely debris now, James. I can see there's a debris cloud near the bottom.
At that point, we've done our job. We have visually identified it, given that information, so then James Spann, the National Weather Service, and be able to tell people, this is not just on radar. This is verified on the ground by 2 professional meteorologists.
While James Spann tracks the Cordova tornado, a second team of storm spotters flags another twister.
John Oldshoe also has a tornado on his live stream.
All right, goodness gracious. That is a large wedge tornado.
2 storm spotter teams are now each tracking 2 separate EF4 tornadoes on live TV.
It was the moment when we could see the lowering behind the trees that we knew what was coming to Tuscaloosa.
We are now calling a tornado emergency for Tuscaloosa and Northport. It's way, way, way too close.
On April 27, 2011, one of the worst tornado outbreaks in U.S. history is barreling through the state of Alabama and has already claimed dozens of lives.
Get away from the door!
The magnitude of this super outbreak has caught everyone by surprise. So far, 43 tornadoes have struck.
There's the tornado. Keep back, keep driving. It's out on top of us.
Don't open the door yet. Please don't open the door yet.
Meteorologists James Spann and Jason Simpson scrambled to get the word out and to save lives. They tracked an EF4 that devastated the small town of Cordova, population 2,100. Now they're streaming live video of another EF4 approaching the city of Tuscaloosa, population 90,000.
So John Oldshoe has a large wedge tornado. I believe John's on Interstate 59. Is that right, Jason?
He's at Knoxville looking up at this thing as it's coming up toward Highway 11.
For the first time today, James Spann and his teams of storm spotters are ahead of the game. They report on a tornado touchdown 50 kilometers outside of the Tuscaloosa city limits.
My job was not to make it the best shot in the world, My job was to get in front of the storm that was going to produce the tornado and get video live back to James.
It just got black and black, more black. I mean, it was just the perfect wedge-shaped tornado.
It doesn't matter what you say when there's a tornado coming through a city. It's too late. It doesn't matter. What matters is what you said 40 minutes ago. And in this case, I don't have to say anything because of John and Ben's live stream. There it is. This is an emergency. You go to a safe place right now.
With a population of over 90,000, about a third of whom are students, Tuscaloosa is one of the biggest cities in the state. Alabama University graduate and journalist Kim Cross has lived here for most of her career.
Alabama is what I always imagined a college would look like. The campus is beautiful. It's around a big green quad, and it's a huge school, and there are apartments and little cottages and rental homes, and a lot of students will get, 3 or 4 roommates and get a rental house. That's what we did. Football is really, really a big deal. On game days, you will see the quad blanketed with tents and carpets and flat screen TVs and lazy boys. I mean, they take it to a new level with the tailgating.
But today is not that kind of day. A large EF4 tornado is fast approaching the heavily populated college town.
Let's look at the Tuscaloosa Skycam. Jason is working that.
While Span tries to convince his audience to take shelter, 2 young daredevils, Ryan Chandler and Nate Huguet, have ideas of their own.
I'd always wanted to chase a storm, so I posted a tweet about who wants to chase a storm with me. My friend Nate said I'm in.
Nobody should be driving. Everybody down there listening to me on radio in Tuscaloosa, stop now at the next exit, the next convenience store that will let you in.
At this point, it's still lighthearted and fun, and we're making jokes. As we get on 359, we start to be able to see the tornado.
If you know anybody that maybe doesn't have electricity and cannot watch us or listen to us, make a call. Let things huge. The camera, for those of you that are watching maybe for the first time, this is on top of the Tuscaloosa County Courthouse.
We're looking back up a little bit so that it's not so shaky, but look at that.
Right, and this thing is still southwest of downtown Tuscaloosa. Moving north.
That's southwest of downtown Tuscaloosa. There it is. You can see debris in the air.
Look at the debris. Look at the debris in that. Goodness gracious. This will be a day that will go down in state history, and all you can do is pray for those people.
The twister has been on the ground for close to half an hour.
There's a tornado right there. Guys, everybody go.
Wreaking havoc through the city suburbs.
It is right in there.
With smartphones and digital cameras, awestruck residents capture images of the tornado as it marches past.
Oh my God.
Towards the heart of downtown Tuscaloosa at McFarland and 15th Street.
This is a large, violent tornado coming up on downtown Tuscaloosa. Be in a safe place right now. So now we're starting to see the flashes.
There it freaking is. Oh my God. Okay, speed up.
It's out the passenger window, so of course Nate's filming and looking at it, and it's not until it's right on top of us that I actually get my first view of it.
Go, Chandler. Never in my life will I see this again. Oh my God.
I turn the car around so that I have the opportunity to see the storm out the front windshield.
Chandler, do not go back that way.
Nate, film it.
I am.
And it's right there in front of us.
There's 2 of them. We need to go that way.
No,
Chandler, go back.
We're fine.
Chandler, go the back. I'm not kidding.
This being my first opportunity to see the storm, I'm kind of like a moth to light at that point. I'm just gonna sit there, and he yelled at me and told me to go back. So we put the car in reverse on the wrong side of the interstate.
It's crossing the interstate right where we were. Oh my God. You can see huge debris. Oh my God. That thing is destroying everything.
If you have a child on the campus of the University of Alabama, call them and tell them now to go into a safe place. Let's pan over to the left.
Oh, my
Let's take it
goodness.
full.
Look at that.
Are you kidding me?
Look at all the stuff flying around up there.
That's coming over near Interstate 359 in Skyland. Nobody should be out there. This is an extremely violent situation.
I had turned the TV on in Elmore County, and I knew where that storm was. I knew the direction it was heading, and I knew my baby was in that path.
I've got my mom, my brother, my sister, my family, my wife, my 2 boys, all living there, and now I'm not home to protect them.
Students living off campus in ground floor apartments take shelter in bathrooms where pipes in the walls and bathtubs offer protection.
Get back there!
Oh my God!
Holy, look at it, dude! Oh, get inside it! It's fucking massive!
He texted me at 5:12 and he told me, he said, this thing is huge, I'm fine. And I texted him back and I said, so y'all are okay?
Oh, it's right outside. Oh my God!
The phone cut off at 5:13. I knew in that second she was gone.
Moments later, the tornado comes knocking at Will Caruso's door. Incredibly, like so many others, he has the presence of mind to keep recording with his smartphone.
It is exactly 5:14. The tornado is passing over us. Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I love you guys. I love you guys. Holy shit. Holy shit. Lulu, hey! Lulu, got my goal. I got it.
We were all holding on to each other. I was holding on to 2 dogs and trying to pry myself between 2 walls and just doing whatever I could just not to get sucked up.
Oh, God. Windows are going out! The water's coming down. The water's coming down.
A large tree behind the house fell on top of the roof, and beams from the attic and insulation and drywall came pouring down on top of us.
Oh, God.
The wind is tearing his house apart, but Will's smartphone is still recording.
Something fell on your roof, man. Still pretty windy out there, but... Oh, my God. Look at it. Oh, my God. Look at it.
After it passed, the backside of the house was just demolished, just crushed. All the windows are blown in, glass and drywall.
Tornado just passed over the house. The house is destroyed. Oh my God, everything is gone. There's got to be people trapped in there. We got to check on them.
The tornado's fury lasted only 15 to 20 seconds, but the damage it caused was apocalyptic, and it's not over yet. It's still on the ground, on a path towards its next victims.
We're going to get hit by a tornado.
On April 27, 2011, the state of Alabama is under siege.
Oh my God!
That thing is destroying everything.
The Super Outbreak's latest tornado barreled through downtown Tuscaloosa. Now it's headed toward the nearby town of Holt, Alabama. Vietnam veteran and environmentalist John Wathan knows this storm is the real deal.
Here it is, boys and girls.
Our weatherman, James Spann, is normally cool, calm, collected. Nothing rattles this guy.
But I don't want to be so specific. I want everybody in the city limits of Tuscaloosa to stay sheltered.
I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before.
The urgency now is for those of you out here on the eastern side of town, over here toward Cottondale and Holt and Alberta City.
People can read me. I've been here since the Civil War. I'm old as dirt. I've been on television forever. They can read my body language. They can read my voice inflection. And they could see a change when I saw that live stream.
After hearing the edge in James Spann's voice, I took my camera bags, my guitar. I went up there to the storm room that I'd built and put everything inside, started getting the family inside.
Look at the fog coming up out of the valleys. This is spooky.
The creek was evaporating. The barometric pressure was dropping so fast that it was actually pulling moisture out of the creek.
Inside the vortex of a tornado, a vacuum effect occurs. At times when the atmospheric pressure drops and the updrafts are strong enough, it can suck up water from a river into the tornado's funnel. This phenomenon was captured by a weather camera in Springfield, Massachusetts in 2015.
Then it got dark outside, The wind went completely calm, but then it started howling, and you could hear the roar coming. Get down! Get down! It dawned on me that, yeah, this was coming straight at me, and I needed to be underground. That's where I cut it off and ran underground. That's a dumpster in the air right there. When I looked up over the camera and saw that, it's when this is not a viewfinder, this is real.
We're in the storm room.
Listen, I got one bolt locked on the door when it started rattling.
There goes the house.
At one point, we could hear what I thought was the house leaving, but it was actually my neighbor's trailer. It picked his trailer up and slammed it up against the house and just demolished it.
I feel my ears popping.
The barometric pressure went so low that our ears were popping worse than any airplane ride I'd ever been on.
I smell trees. All right, I think it's gone.
Oh, crap!
Oh, my God!
That's right out this window here.
My brother Johnny's lost every damn thing. We got roof damage. Oh, my truck! Oh, God almighty!
Have you seen this lately?
No. No. Sorry. It was gone, man.
Oh, my God.
We were bloody lucky. That house was built right after Hurricane Katrina to withstand 200-mile-an-hour winds. I built it.
My God, this son of a bitch. Oh, my God! Oh, my God!
I don't like to watch this.
Oh, my God!
The tornado shows no sign of letting up. It's growing in size and power and becoming more dangerous by the minute.
Holy
freaking huge, man.
This is the storm right here that produced all of the damage in Tuscaloosa County coming up toward Birmingham. And again, it is a clear call to action. There it is right there.
This is going to turn out to be one of the biggest tornadoes that ever hit Alabama, I think.
The tornado is almost 2 kilometers wide. It's headed straight for Birmingham, the largest city in the state, and home to journalist Kim Cross.
When the Tuscaloosa tornado was coming toward Birmingham, it looked like it was on track to hit our house.
We have a large, violent tornado. There's no if, it's a matter of where and when.
After we saw that, our power flickered and died. And when that happens, not only do you lose TV, you lose your lights, you lose all of the whirring, clicking things that happen in a house, and it gets dead quiet. I follow James Spann's Twitter feed, and he tweeted a link to the live stream coverage, so we were able to watch TV on our phones. And at some point, he calls out our neighborhood.
And again, this thing is awfully close to Bessemer, Hueytown, Fairfield. If I've called out your neighborhood, you should be in a safe place.
That's when you think we could die in a few minutes.
Luckily, the EF4 never made it into the center of Birmingham. It changed course, missed the downtown area, and then headed straight to the suburbs.
We came out after the warning expired, and we looked around. There was not a leaf disturbed in our neighborhood, and we thought, well, was that it? And 7 miles away, Pleasant Grove was devastated.
Tornadoes are the Russian roulette of storms. No one can predict when or where they'll strike. And while Kim Cross and her family don't suffer damage or harm, not everyone was so lucky. On April 27, 2011, a record-breaking number of destructive long-track tornadoes strike Alabama. The storm is on a rampage, destroying several $1 billion of property and taking scores of lives. Since the early hours of the morning, meteorologists James Spann and Jason Simpson have been on the air trying to save lives.
The sole reason we're here is to provide lead time for people to go to a safe place of a storm that can kill you. In the case of April 27th, it didn't stop for hours and hours and hours and hours. It was like bullets from hell.
We've got to get through this event so we don't have any more loss of life.
It's now late afternoon, and as the sun lowers on the horizon, the heat that helped fuel the twisters finally begins to dissipate in some parts of the state. And Span's TV station begins to broadcast damage reports. Storm spotters John Oldshoe and Ben Greer have made it back to Tuscaloosa, their hometown.
It's an obstacle course of overturned cars, upside down trucks, and overturned 18-wheelers. I am finally relieved to get a text from my wife. She says they are fine, don't worry about it.
I look to see all this devastation. John starts sending a live feed back to Spain for the first coverage of Tuscaloosa of the damage that's done.
So that is a live stream coming from John Oldshoe. John is on the scene of that severe damage down in Tuscaloosa.
He tells me, Ben, hop on outside, start taking pictures now. I get out and I realize that about 600 yards from me is where my sister's house used to be. There's nothing there. I pick up my phone and I text my mother. Within 10 seconds, I get a reply, she's fine. She's on her way here.
Just a few blocks away, amateur storm chasers Ryan Chandler and Nate Huguet try to get back home to their families.
I can't even recognize this place.
We see the damage, we see the houses, but what's actually happened a mile down the road, you have no idea.
Light poles down on the road. This thing can't focus quick enough.
So as we pull up behind the storm, a woman comes running up to the vehicle and we tell her to get in.
Come on. Get in, get in. Come on.
Oh my God, my dog.
Are you okay? Hey, are people okay?
I don't know, I can't. Oh my God, my dog dead. Oh my God. Keep on.
We gotta, like there's tons of people out there. I know.
Oh my God.
So at that point, we get out and start digging people out of their houses.
For those living beyond the city limits, finding loved ones is not always easy. The storm knocked down power lines, destroyed relay stations, and communication towers.
We kept calling and couldn't get a response, you know, and that wasn't like him not to answer his phone.
I called many times the hospital, the student health center, Ferguson Center, all of the places that they were telling online and on the news for you to call to locate your student.
So that's when we got in the car and drove to Tuscaloosa.
Pratt City, a bedroom community of Birmingham, has also been hit. That's where Alter lives, but he was lucky. He was at work when the tornado slammed into his neighborhood.
I got a call from a female friend. She says that the storm was in the area. Then I got another call from another one of my neighbors. He was like, you might want to try to get home. I said, man, it's looking like a third world country over here.
Alter's good friend, filmmaker Tig Knight, filmed as they surveyed the damage.
Power lines down, debris everywhere.
Devastation.
Yeah, people just everywhere. Siding thrown everywhere, everything was in the yard. A neighbor's house, I could see directly into his kitchen. And walk in the house and I could just look up and I could see the sky just like I can see it right now. It was almost like it just had a sunroof. The top half portion, the roof was completely gone.
Everything was in disarray and it was devastating. And like I said, knowing where different things were placed and located, and now it's just completely gone. It was your bedroom.
It really didn't sink in until you just had time to sit down and think about it.
Probably felt good that you wasn't home.
Yeah, exactly. Because if I was at home, I was going to either be in one or two places. It was going to be one in my bedroom or two downstairs in the basement. And my bedroom, two of the walls that face outside were actually gone. So, you know, it could have just came, couldn't be here today, so, you know.
What's going through your mind like right now?
I don't know. Rebuild or move?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
That's the question right there. Major question.
To stay and rebuild, or leave and begin a new life somewhere else, perhaps even in a safer place? That was the question on a lot of people's minds that day. An unprecedented tornado outbreak strikes the southern United States on April 27, 2011. The hardest hit are the residents of Alabama, where over 50 tornadoes have touched down so far and wreaked havoc. Carrie Kirby and her husband Hal found shelter in Billy Little's bunker, but now they're stuck.
The power lines have flowed over the door here.
Over our door right here?
Over that door. We stuck.
So 3 or 4 of them put their shoulders up against the door and shoved until they got a big enough crack that Hal could stick his head out the door. Billy said, "What do you see, Hal?" And he looked around and he said, "Nothing, Billy. I don't see anything. It's all gone." They all got the telephone pole off the door and we came out and there were just piles of debris everywhere, metal twisted everywhere. We looked over there and the black and white horse that had been in this field right behind us was sticking out the top of one of the chicken houses that was laying on the ground, and he was flailing his head around. And I just couldn't look at that anymore, so we went over towards Billy and Nancy's house to look at what was left over there. His house had been stone, rock, brick, and the walls inside were tongue and groove walls, and there was nothing left that you could recognize in that pile of debris except a rock fireplace sticking up in the middle of it. There wasn't really an option to pick up and move. You just take one day at a time and dig in and build it back.
Further south, the Stevens drive to Tuscaloosa to search for their son William, who has not reached out to them in over 3 hours.
It looked like somebody had come in and dropped a bomb on the place, because you could not drive down McFarland Boulevard.
Will had decided to ride out the storm with a childhood friend, Danielle Downs, and her roommate, Lauren Brown.
The house was surrounded by a lot of trees, and it took the trees down, and one come down and just took the whole house, just centered the house. When they found him, he had one under one arm, one under the other. He was on top of both of them.
Yeah, he was laying over top of them, and they was holding hands. And Lauren's
nails had broken
nail
off into his
print,
hand.
yeah, had broken off into his
She had
hands.
squeezed his hand so tight that her fingernails broke off in his hand.
Lauren's mother, Ashley Mims, found her daughter in a hospital morgue.
She had pieces of debris in her hair, a broken Xbox game, dirt and stuff like that, grass, leaves, mixed in her curly hair. And she was just asleep, is what it looked like.
In all, the death toll was 252, a number that haunts James Spann to this day.
That number will be etched in my mind until the day I die, because that's the death toll. That's the only number I'm focused on. History's going to judge what I did on the Green Wall, but the number of people that died lets me know that there was a lot of things we didn't do right. And yet at the same time, a lot of people that lived, there were some things we did right.
I believe, like he does, that what we do is a service. We want to serve the communities that we love. So when we looked at each other about 11 o'clock that night, when the final tornado warning had ended and we signed off the air, there was nothing to say. There was just a heaviness, there was grief, there was sadness, because this was our state.
Many records were broken that day. The frequency of the tornadoes, the distance they traveled, and their wind speeds. And while much about tornadoes remains a mystery, modern research can increase warning lead times using computer models and ground observations. Because as global temperatures continue to rise, it's likely that the frequency of super outbreaks will also continue to rise. And meteorologists like James Spann can do little more than prepare for the next catastrophe and find new ways to save more lives.
Often in the weather enterprise, we're very guilty of being narcissistic, and we thump our chest, we talk about we saved lives and we're so good. Well, we didn't save 252 in my state that day. I won't accept that, and I'm very driven to find out what went wrong. Let's get in there and fix it. The physical science was excellent. The social science, behavioral science, we have to learn.
Come on, Reeves. Reeves, come on. Reba.
They're huge funnels of wind, fallen from the sky, traveling at great speeds, sweeping up everything in their path.
As I was lifted up in the air, my glasses fell off. It just stumped something up, and the ceiling came off and all the stuff came on me.
Tornadoes are a force of nature. There's nothing that can stop them.
Il est hors de question d'affronter un monstre pareil, un phénomène aussi destructeur qu'une tornade.
Thanks to science, we now know that these giant vortexes are created in the eye of the most violent storms. When masses of air at different temperature and humidity meet, and when winds blow at the pace of a high-speed train, the conditions are perfect for creating one of these terrifyingly powerful monsters.
Les vents les plus forts à la surface de la Terre possible ont lieu dans les tornades.
Tornadoes can take on vastly different forms, such as these waterspouts over the ocean. On the ground, their power is unrivaled. Inside the biggest vortexes, winds reach up to 500 kilometers per hour. What's more, just one storm can produce several tornadoes at a time across several kilometers. But what are the most extreme forms of tornado? Our first stop is in the USA, one of the countries that experiences the most tornadoes each year.
Aux États-Unis, il y a environ 1200, 1300 tornades chaque année.
In Tornado Alley, we discover how what specialists call F5s are formed, the most powerful tornadoes ever measured. We'll find out about the Moore tornado in May 2013, which destroyed almost 1,200 buildings and killed 24 people in less than an hour, creating $2 billion of damage.
You literally see it coming down the road, just shredding stuff up, and then, I mean, you just don't think, like, I'm gonna survive this.
We'll then see how tornadoes have affected many different places on the planet, including France. Here in August 2008, a giant tornado raged through the small northern town of Ormont.
C'est un phénomène qui mesurait entre 70 et 100 mètres au plus large, qui se déplaçait à près de 100 km/h. Vous sortez de chez vous, vous arrivez, vous voyez ce phénomène qui arrive. Honnêtement, il n'y a plus rien à faire.
Science will allow us to understand just how a tornado is capable of lifting up a truck and sending debris flying several hundred kilometers.
On a déjà vu des tornades qui ont produit des projections d'objets telles qu'une clé plantée dans des murs en briques.
Finally, we'll discover an even more worrying phenomenon, which is becoming increasingly common in the United States: outbreaks.
On peut aller parfois jusqu'à plusieurs centaines de tornades en quelques jours.
Hundreds of tornadoes simultaneously ravage an area when ideal conditions are reached. Scientists seek to find out more about the power, speed and destruction level of these tornadoes in an attempt to reduce their impact. It's not yet known whether one day we'll be able to predict them and protect ourselves against them. A sky infested with deathly dark clouds, the rumbling sound of thunder. Suddenly, a strange mist springs up above the storm. It's shaped like a funnel, turning in on itself. Upon touching the ground, it becomes a tornado, destroying everything in its path. Every year, they're the talk of the media. We're fascinated by their seemingly uncontrollable power and the huge devastation left in their wake. Though the public may know little about these forces of nature, scientists have managed to uncover most of the secrets surrounding these giant whirlwinds. But what exactly is a tornado?
Alors une tornade, c'est un tourbillon dans lequel règnent des vents extrêmement violents et qui prend naissance à la base de l'orage et qui descend jusqu'au sol.
A huge vacuum that sucks up everything in its path, born in the most powerful of storms. Today, specialists have a lot of knowledge about this complex and destructive phenomenon. It all relies on the presence of two particularly powerful natural elements. The first is atmospheric instability. When opposing masses of air collide, tornadoes form. The second is the jet stream, one of the planet's strongest altitude winds, which protects and feeds tornadoes. In order to uncover the secrets behind tornadoes, we head to the USA.
Aux États-Unis, il y a environ 1200, 1300 tornades chaque année sur l'ensemble du territoire. Mais il faut savoir que les 2/3 de ces tornades se concentrent plus spécifiquement sur la Tornado Alley, une grande partie des plaines du centre et de l'est des États-Unis.
The USA is one of the countries which are most affected by tornadoes in the world. In this country of excess, an average of 800 tornadoes rage through Tornado Alley each year. In this huge area, which covers 3 million square kilometers, which is 5 times the size of France, there are not only lots of tornadoes, but they're also amongst the most destructive of their kind. In March 1925, a particularly damaging tornado destroyed 3 central US states. It set a devastating new record.
Alors en 1925, on a assisté à ce que l'on appelle la Tri-State Tornado, c'est-à-dire une tornade qui a été la plus meurtrière de l'histoire des États-Unis, qui a quand même parcouru pendant 3 heures et demie le pays sur une distance de 325 km.
Monstrous tornado left 695 people dead. On the 3rd of May 1999, several vortexes suddenly formed, one of which was a giant tornado made up of the fastest winds measured on Earth, 484 kilometers an hour. The total cost of the damage caused has been estimated at almost $3 billion. At the end of May 2013, the largest tornado in history was measured in El Reno, Oklahoma. It measured more than 4 kilometers at its base, which is the equivalent of 7 of Paris's arrondissements.
Quand on l'apercevait, beaucoup de gens ne se rendaient même pas compte que c'était une tornade, tellement elle était large. On pensait à une espèce de colonne de grêle ou une pluie extrêmement intense, et il y avait des petits points qui montaient, c'était les phares des voitures qui avaient été aspirés et qui étaient rejetés sur les bords de la tornade.
So what explanation is there for this phenomenon and its particular violence in such a specific area of the US? Tornado Alley brings together all the ingredients necessary to form the most extreme tornado-creating storms. It's home to several opposing masses of air.
C'est d'une part l'air chaud et humide qui remonte du golfe du Mexique, d'autre part de l'air moins chaud et sec qui vient de la partie sud des Rocheuses, et puis de l'air froid en provenance du Canada ou du nord des Rocheuses qui arrive par le nord-ouest.
It's the combination of these 3 air masses which have different humidity levels and temperatures that is at the origin of everything. But why? It all begins with the sun. As the Earth is round, the sun's rays have different distances to travel. This creates different zones where the air is warmer or colder. Varying temperatures mean the air behaves in different ways. Physicists are very familiar with this scientific principle. It's called thermal convection.
La convection thermique, c'est le phénomène physique qui tente à provoquer des mouvements d'air dans l'atmosphère, ces mouvements étant générés par des différences de température.
As air heats up, it expands. The molecules which make it up move away from each other. As there are fewer molecules, the warm air is lighter. On the contrary, if the air is cold, the molecules move closer together. The cold air becomes heavier. It's a process which combines temperature and atmospheric humidity.
Contrairement à ce qu'on pourrait croire, l'air humide est plus léger que l'air sec. Donc la masse d'air la plus légère dans l'absolu, c'est une masse d'air chaude et humide, contrairement à de l'air froid et sec qui va être, lui, très dense.
This is exactly what happens in a pan of boiling water. The water vapor which rises is air which is very humid. Going back to Tornado Alley, the dry, heavier air from the southwest of the US passes underneath the warm, humid air from the Gulf of Mexico. It pushes it upwards. As it rises, the warm air cools down and another process turns it into clouds. This process is called condensation.
Au bout d'un moment, cet air chaud et humide finit par se refroidir tellement que l'humidité qu'il contient se condense, forme des gouttelettes et donc un nuage d'orage.
This kind of cloud is called cumulonimbus. At its heart are what scientists call cells, which are characteristic of storms. In the case of only one cell, a storm is called a single-cell storm. These are the kind of storms you might see in summer, ones which aren't particularly powerful. Some storms, however, are particularly violent. These are supercell storms, and it's these which create tornadoes. This is exactly what happened in the city of Moore in 2013 in the United States of America. On the 20th of May 2013, one of the worst tornadoes in history devastated the city of Moore, Oklahoma. Within 40 minutes, the tornado traveled 30 kilometers, destroying 1,150 houses and 2 schools.
We're standing right in the middle of the epicenter of the storm, the path. You can look there and just see how it came through.
This is all that remains of one of the schools, the school young Gabriel Wheeler attended. On that day, David, his dad, experienced the worst moment of his life.
As soon as I heard that the tornado was coming down to 149th Street, I knew it was going to be a direct hit to my son's school.
At the heart of the tornado, wind speeds reached 338 kilometers per hour. At such a speed, anything in its path would be swept up. Specialists therefore class this unstoppable whirlwind as a category F5.
En termes de destruction, une tornade F5 est ce qu'il y a de plus extrême. Donc ça veut dire des bâtiments, même les plus durs, qui peuvent être soit sévèrement endommagés, soit détruits. Le transport d'objets, bien évidemment, les véhicules qui s'envolent, les camions qui s'envolent.
Tornadoes are categorized according to the Fujita-Pearson scale, from F0 to F5, according to the damage they create and the speed of the winds at their center.
Alors F0, on va avoir des branches cassées, on va avoir de l'herbe couchée, éventuellement un petit hangar qui peut être endommagé, jusqu'à la F5 qui peut raser un bâtiment jusqu'aux fondations.
Compared to this kind of power, F0 can seem a little weak. However, with winds blowing at up to 137 kilometers an hour, F0 has the strength of a violent storm. And F1, which blows up to 177 kilometers an hour, is the equivalent of a hurricane. This just goes to show that tornadoes are one of the most violent forces of nature. So just how could a F5 have formed in the city of Moore in 2013?
Alors, le 20 mai 2013, on avait les conditions entre guillemets classiques, le cas d'école d'une situation à fort risque tornadique, avec de l'air très chaud et humide qui remonte dans un flux de sud depuis le golfe du Mexique, et puis cet air plus sec aussi qui est arrivé par l'ouest du Texas. Donc voilà une situation classique. Et donc un front orageux qui s'est formé à l'interface entre l'air sec et l'air humide et en plein sur l'Oklahoma. Donc on a eu des orages supercellulaires et tornadiques particulièrement violents.
Scientists say that everything stems from the process of convection. The warm, humid air is less dense than the dry air, which pushes the warm air upwards. The greater the difference in humidity and temperature, the stronger the force of the upward push, resulting in quickly ascending winds. In the case of the F5 in Moore, the difference between the dry air arriving from Texas and the warm, humid air from the Gulf of Mexico was huge. The air rose at a speed of 180 kilometers an hour. This speed acts as raw energy. In Moore, it rose by 5,000 joules per kilo. Given the size of the storm, this is the equivalent to the power of the Nagasaki nuclear bomb. And that's not all, as it's here that the third mass of air present in Tornado Alley comes into play. On top of the 2 existing air masses, another colder mass flows down from Canada. The combination of this colder northerly air with the warm southerly air is about to create an imbalance due to differences in pressure. As we have seen, the temperature of air makes it lighter or heavier, therefore air exerts more or less pressure according to its temperature. As nature doesn't seem to be too fond of imbalance, it seeks a way to correct it.
On voit tout de suite que les régions chaudes sont plus légères, les régions froides sont plus lourdes, et donc ça va induire des mouvements d'air du froid vers le chaud pour rééquilibrer justement cette pression.
Generally speaking, these movements of air between areas of varying pressure are what we call wind. In Tornado Alley, this wind moves from the polar air, which has more pressure, towards the warm air, which has less. Once again, the difference in temperature and therefore pressure is so significant that this wind, named the jet stream, moves particularly quickly.
Ça peut aller de l'ordre de quelques dizaines de kilomètres/heure, parfois 90 km/h, mais jusqu'à des valeurs extrêmement importantes, de l'ordre de 320, 360 km/h. Et parfois, dans certaines situations, il a dépassé les 500 km/h.
This jet stream circulates at altitude, and it's so fast that it creates a suction effect on everything beneath it.
Lorsqu'il va passer sur les sommets de l'orage, il va littéralement l'aspirer encore plus haut et donner une capacité d'ascension verticale à l'orage bien plus importante.
The jet stream allows the upward movement of the warm, humid air to become so powerful that the storm takes on huge proportions within minutes.
Donc ça fait un énorme nuage qui part de 1 km d'altitude jusqu'à 10-15 km.
A 14-kilometre high storm cloud that's almost 3 times as high as Mont Blanc. In Moore, in May 2013, this cloud transformed into a deadly beast which would soon unite all the ideal conditions to create a very destructive tornado. Propelled to a very high altitude, the warm air cooled down quickly, which aided the process of condensation.
Les gouttelettes vont grossir, il y a aussi des cristaux, des grêlons qui se forment, et donc c'est ça qui donne les fortes précipitations sous les orages.
A deluge of rain comes pouring down, but all this precipitation could play a useful role. It could fall upon the storm and kill the source that feeds it, the warm air. Put simply, it could make it disappear. Or it could in normal weather conditions, but not when there's a jet stream, like in Moore. As soon as it reaches altitude, the warm, humid air is pushed by this ultra-powerful wind, and when it turns into precipitation, there's little left that can be done. In May 2013, the tornado began to rage within a matter of minutes. William Diggs remembers it all too well.
You can actually see, like, directly in that angle when it was about to touch, and you can see the clouds and stuff spinning around.
What William saw is typical during the formation of a tornado. The rising column of air is ready, protected by heavy rain, and only needs to start rotating to create a tornado. And for that to happen, yet another process is needed. This is what scientists call wind shear.
Avant la naissance proprement dit de la tornade, l'orage lui-même va se mettre en rotation. Comment? Tout simplement par un effet de cisaillement. Ce sont des vents de sens opposé qui vont commencer à entraîner une rotation du système orageux. Et c'est seulement après que la tornade va prendre naissance.
Wind shear is when winds are traveling in different directions on the ground and at altitude. These opposing winds will trigger the rotation of the storm in 2 stages. Firstly, the rising air begins to rotate upon itself around a horizontal axis. The winds on the ground push it in one direction and those at altitude push it in another. Then, as the air continues to be drawn upwards, the rotation picks back up and forms a huge column of rising, rotating wind.
Ce tourbillon géant, qui peut avoir un diamètre variable, c'est entre 1 km et parfois 15-20 km pour les plus gros, s'appelle un mésocyclone. Et là, on va avoir cette rotation qui s'effectue et la colonne d'air chaud qui va monter.
The moment the storm begins to rotate and the mesocyclone develops, it becomes a supercell storm. This is the most dangerous category of storm. From this moment on, the active forces within the storm are able to come together to form a particularly destructive tornado. This is precisely what happened on the 20th of May 2013 in Oklahoma.
Les cisaillements sur l'Oklahoma ce jour-là étaient particulièrement favorables au renforcement de l'orage et donc de la rotation mésocyclonique. Et c'est ça qui a fait que cette tornade a pu se renforcer rapidement.
At 2:56 p.m., a tornado appears 7 kilometers southwest of the small city of Newcastle. At first, it's not very powerful, classed only as F0. But it moves very quickly and soon develops more power. Within barely 10 minutes, it has advanced more than 6 kilometers and reached category F4.
Alors une tornade F4, c'est quand même un phénomène dont les vitesses des vents dans le vortex sont comprises entre 300 et 400 km/h approximativement. Et bien évidemment, sur des maisons qui sont américaines, composées essentiellement de bois, de préfabriqués et de placo, il est bien évident que les maisons sont littéralement soufflées.
The tornado continues on its path and crosses the Interstate 35 highway. At the edge of the city, it destroys a ranch, killing around 100 horses. And just as it's getting ready to hit the city, it turns into a category F5.
Une tornade F5 sur une zone urbaine est la pire des situations, c'est la situation que l'on appelle catastrophique. Ça veut dire que là, elle va augmenter en puissance, bien évidemment, mais aussi elle va se nourrir de tous les objets qu'elle absorbe et qu'elle va en fait éjecter alentour. Donc autant de projectiles mortels ou potentiellement en capacité de blesser gravement les gens. Et puis elle va bien entendu passer sur des zones urbanisées, donc faire considérablement exploser le nombre de victimes.
The residents of Moore are alerted by the media. There's mass panic. The deadly whirlwind is heading straight for them.
You literally see it coming down the road, just shredding stuff up. And then, I mean, you just don't think, like, I'm going to survive this.
The tornado passes the pharmacy. Customers just have enough time to take shelter in the storeroom.
And we could hear the storm go over. Our ears were popping and everything from the pressure change. And you could hear debris hitting everywhere.
The tornado tears up everything in its path, cables and transformers included. Thankfully, it just skirts around the pharmacy. After having raged through the first few areas, the tornado is headed for David Wheeler's son's school.
As soon as it basically went by his school, I just left.
It's impossible for this father to catch up with the tornado, which now has a speed of almost 100 kilometers an hour, especially as a torrential downpour is now hammering down on the city. When he arrives, everything has been destroyed. There are just a few rescue workers combing through the rubble. For 3 hours, he searches through the debris and ends up finding his son. Little Gabriel is practically unharmed. It's nothing short of a miracle, as when the tornado hit the school, the winds at its center were blowing at almost 340 kilometers an hour.
It was really hard. I thought I was going to die because I was lifted up in the air. My glasses fell off. It just thumped something up, and the ceiling came off and all the stuff came on me.
Within just a few minutes, 24 people were killed, 6 of them in this school. Another school was destroyed, along with 1,150 houses. For those who witnessed it, the Moore tornado will always remain a catastrophe of unprecedented violence.
I actually saw the backside of the tornado as it was leaving. It was huge, as big as that whole building there, it seemed to me.
The total cost of damages caused exceeded $2 billion. It was only 8 kilometers away in the east of the city that the tornado disappeared, leaving behind it a trail of devastation. This is just one of the many tornadoes which devastate central United States each spring. Though they may be the most publicized, they are far from being the only tornadoes on the planet.
De vastes zones du monde peuvent connaître des tornades, mais avec des fréquences ou des probabilités plus ou moins fortes.
For a tornado to form, there needs to be first a storm. But even though equatorial countries have the most storms on Earth, they don't have the most tornadoes, as the other crucial factor is missing. There's no jet stream.
Le jet stream favorable à la formation des tornades, on va le trouver principalement en périphérie des zones subtropicales.
The subtropics surround the equator, forming a huge band of the Earth, several thousand kilometers long. The countries most affected by earthquakes all lie in this zone. This, of course, includes the USA, but beneath it there's also Argentina, South Africa and Australia. Above these, Japan, China, India, and most notably Bangladesh.
En 1989, au Bangladesh, une tornade, la plus meurtrière de l'histoire répertoriée à ce jour, a fait quand même 1300 victimes.
The 1989 tornado was a F5, and its vortex was 2.4 kilometers wide. Its victim rate was so high due to the fact that it traveled through several densely populated slums. It's almost impossible to know exactly how many tornadoes hit Bangladesh each year, as many of its areas are very isolated. But some experts think there are at least as many as in the US. That's over 1,000 each year. The jet stream is particularly strong in Bangladesh, and like in the US, several masses of air of vastly different temperatures meet here. On one side, the warm, humid air from the Bay of Bengal, and on the other, the glacial air which comes down from the Himalayas.
Vous avez des glaciers qui sont très froids et donc qui refroidissent un petit peu l'air qui est juste immédiatement à leur proximité. Et si c'est en altitude, l'air froid étant plus lourd que, on va dire, l'air ambiant en montagne, par exemple en plein été, cet air froid qui est produit par le glacier, il va descendre dans la vallée.
Even more incredibly, there are even tornadoes over the sea. Experts call them waterspouts, and although impressive, they are less powerful than tornadoes on land. Just like them, waterspouts require warm air to be pushed upwards by cold air to form a rotating column. In order to gain power, the difference in temperature between the two air masses needs to be great. However, the ocean limits this difference. This is what we call thermal inertia.
L'océan, en fait, a une inertie thermique très importante et met beaucoup de temps à restituer la chaleur qu'il a pu emmagasiner, contrairement à la Terre, par exemple, qui sera en mesure de restituer cette chaleur beaucoup plus rapidement.
On the ground, temperatures can rise by tens of degrees within a mere few hours, but it takes much longer in the sea. As the sea gives off less heat, the difference compared to the cold air is smaller, and offshore tornadoes called waterspouts are less powerful. As we can see, tornadoes can form in various parts of the world, even out at sea. But what about Europe, and specifically France? As surprising as it may seem, France has seen many more tornadoes than you might think.
Donc en France, effectivement, contrairement à l'idée reçue, il y a des tornades, entre 150 en moyenne et 200 annuellement, dont la quasi-totalité sont heureusement des F0. Donc F0, ça veut dire de très faible durée et qui causent peu de dégâts, donc qui se remarquent au final très peu.
Even though most tornadoes in France aren't very powerful, some have been particularly destructive.
On a eu 2 F5 en France officiellement répertoriées. Une en 1845 qui a traversé une partie de la Seine-Maritime en provoquant la mort de plusieurs dizaines de personnes et qui a aussi créé plusieurs centaines de blessés et de grosses destructions. Et une plus récente en 1967 dans le Pas-de-Calais qui a tué 6 personnes et là aussi a provoqué pas mal de dégâts.
On the 24th of June 1967, a giant 250-metre-long whirlwind raged through France for 25 kilometres, resulting in 6 deaths. A devastating figure, but one which could have been worse, as the tornado didn't pass through any towns. Unfortunately, that is what happened less than 100 kilometres away on the 3rd of August 2008. It was in Ormont, in the commune of Maubeuge.
Si on reprend le cas de la tornade de Haumont, on a donc affaire à un phénomène qui est passé du statut de F0 à F4 relativement rapidement quand même. C'est un phénomène qui mesurait entre 70 et 100 mètres au plus large, qui se déplaçait à près de 100 km/h.
In less than 15 minutes, the Ormont tornado had covered 19 kilometres, killing 3 people and causing huge damage. A catastrophe made possible by the weather conditions that summer's day.
Ce jour-là, le 3 août 2008, on a un front froid orageux qui s'est mis en place sur le nord du pays, avec de l'air chaud et humide qui remontait depuis le centre de la France. En altitude, on avait aussi un fort cisaillement avec un jet stream qui dépassait les 100 nœuds, donc proche de 180 km/h.
Just like in Tornado Alley, it's the presence of the jet stream and the meeting of the masses of air at different temperatures which triggers the formation of a tornado. In this region, cold air coming from England and warm air from the Mediterranean frequently meet. This explains why the most dangerous tornadoes generally take place in the same area of France, the north and northwest. On that day in 2008, the mesocyclone formed towards the end of the day. The warm air starts to rise, pushed up by the cold air from England. Then the current of warm air starts to rotate under the influence of the jet stream. This enormous rising column of wind is still quite far above the ground at around 6 kilometers of altitude. Like in the USA, pushed up by cold air and drawn up by the jet stream, the rotating column gains speed rapidly. It will eventually go so fast that an invisible wall starts forming. This is the start of the formation of a tube.
La zone tourbillonnaire qui forme un tube, ça se comporte comme une cloison en définitive. C'est presque étanche en fait entre ce qui se passe à l'intérieur du tube et à l'extérieur.
In this particularly airtight tube, the rising speed will trigger another process crucial to the formation of a tornado. The tube becomes thinner and thinner. Why? Due to one of the basic laws of physics.
Dès lors que la vitesse de rotation augmente, le diamètre du tourbillon diminue.
Scientists call this process the conservation of angular momentum.
La conservation du moment cinétique, c'est une propriété physique que l'on rencontre par exemple dans le patinage artistique. Prenons l'exemple d'un patineur artistique qui tourne sur lui-même avec les bras écartés. Dès lors qu'il va rapprocher les bras de son axe de rotation, il va se mettre à accélérer. Et dès qu'il réécarte les bras, sa vitesse de rotation ralentit.
It's a universal law of physics. In all circular movement, the relationship between speed, rotation and diameter is always the same. In terms of tornadoes, if the speed increases, the diameter, also called the tuba, decreases. It becomes thinner, then stretches out towards the ground.
Pour conserver la matière, si le diamètre diminue, nécessairement, il va devoir prendre plus d'ampleur dans l'autre direction, c'est-à-dire s'allonger.
The tornado is born. It forms within a matter of seconds.
Le tuba, on commence à le voir apparaître sous la base du nuage et progressivement il va s'étirer. Même si le mouvement est de bas vers le haut, on voit le tuba de plus en plus se former en se rapprochant du sol.
On the 8th of August at 10:28 p.m., the tornado reaches the ground in a field 8 kilometers west of Ormont. The storm has been growing for several hours, but the residents of Ormont could never imagine the catastrophe about to unfold upon them. At first relatively weak, it grows stronger, turning from F0 to F4 in less than 2 minutes, covering 3 kilometers at the same time.
Vous sortez de chez vous, vous arrivez, vous voyez ce phénomène qui arrive. Honnêtement, il n'y a plus rien à faire.
The tornado is heading at full speed down Rue de Vieux-Menil in the commune of Bussière-sur-Sambre. At this late hour, Jean-Christophe and Sophie Paulet are asleep in their bedroom. And it's not the tornado that's about to wake them.
On avait l'impression que le ciel était tout blanc, tout jaune, vraiment. Et c'est ce qui m'a réveillée, moi, la lumière. Donc je me suis levée pour fermer la fenêtre de ma chambre.
Of course, with the storm comes lightning. Sometimes the light can be so bright that the lightning reflects off the walls of the tornado, but it all happens too quickly. The couple don't even have time to realize what's going on.
J'ai senti les murs, vraiment une pression qui est arrivée sur la maison, mais c'était quelque chose d'énorme.
Seconds later, the tornado hits.
Et quand j'ai pris la poignée pour baisser le volet, la vitre a explosé. Et là, j'ai été propulsée, j'ai été projetée dans le couloir. Et là, je me suis sentie tomber et tout a commencé à me tomber dessus.
Despite the sheer force of the impact, Sophie recalls that the window exploded outwards. This is due to the difference in pressure. Due to the speed of the winds at the center of the tornado, pressure is very low inside the vortex. Inside their house, however, pressure is at a normal level. Nature hates things being unbalanced, so the air inside the house tries to escape to join the air in the tornado.
Ça doit s'équilibrer, et donc ça engendre des forces sur les parois de la maison. Si ces forces sont trop grandes, les points les plus faibles de la maison vont partir en premier, ça va être les fenêtres qui vont être attirées à l'extérieur, puisqu'il y a une pression plus faible à l'extérieur. Et puis si c'est vraiment trop fort, la maison ne va pas avoir le temps de réagir. Enfin, même les fenêtres cassées, ça va se passer trop vite et donc ça va arracher aussi la partie solide, les murs de la maison.
This is exactly what happened at the couple's house on the 8th of August 2008.
Je tournais ma tête vers le ciel, je savais même pas que j'avais perdu ma toiture. Et d'un seul coup, je voyais tous les murs s'arracher comme on peut arracher un beefsteak.
The hugely destructive power generated by the difference in pressure is combined with the very strong suction of the tornado. The house is destroyed within seconds.
Et là, je me suis retrouvée sur la maison. La maison, elle était sur 1 mètre de hauteur. Et je me suis retrouvée debout sur la maison.
Jean-Christophe injured his foot, but he and his wife are alive miraculously. The tornado moves away, but they're about to be hit by yet another force of nature.
Et là, à ce moment-là, des trombes d'eau se sont mises à tomber. Mais alors, infernal, quoi. J'ai jamais vu ça. À une force.
The warm, humid air sucked up by the tornado has cooled down and condensed into raindrops. If they had fallen on the same spot, they would have killed the storm by depriving it of its source of warm air. But unfortunately, like in the US, the jet stream has transported the rain clouds.
Les cisaillements de vitesse vont pousser la zone de précipitation à l'extérieur de la colonne d'alimentation en air chaud. De cette façon, la tornade, elle peut perdurer et elle peut toujours continuer à se nourrir en carburant.
In Ormont in 2008, the rain clouds were pushed away from the tornado and caused tons of rain to fall, creating a deluge following closely behind the tornado. Luckily for the residents, this particular downpour was made up of water as opposed to hailstones.
Dans un orage, la taille des grêlons peut être très variable. Les plus gros, par exemple, faisaient une vingtaine de centimètres, c'est la taille d'un melon, en gros, et on avoisine le kilo.
When the current of warm, humid air condenses at high altitude, the water freezes. If the current is strong enough, it'll continue to make the water rise for long enough to allow the hailstones to get bigger before they get so heavy that they end up falling. In the suburb of Ormont on the 8th of August 2008, the tornado continues on its path, heading towards the town. It soon encounters a small forest, the Fay Woods. Will such a large obstacle with its hundreds of huge trees be able to stop it in its tracks? What's about to happen is in fact the exact opposite. The destruction zone of the tornado grows in size, increasing from 100 to over 200 meters wide. Why? Because of the violent winds found at its base, which experts call the debris ball of the tornado.
Ce que l'on appelle le buisson de la tornade, c'est cette zone d'aspiration où on va retrouver la majeure partie des objets, des poussières et de tous les éléments aspirés qui gravitent autour du vortex.
Upon reaching the forest, the tornado tears down several trees, which are swept up in the rotation, adding to its destructive power. Its accumulation of debris grows. Violent winds also add to the power of the main vortex, with the narrow woodland path acting as a funnel for the winds.
Le vent qui arrive aux abords d'une forêt n'a d'autre choix que de passer par des espaces plus restreints. Et en fait, pour conserver son débit, eh bien, il va devoir accélérer sur des espaces comme un chemin forestier, par exemple, ou entre les arbres.
There's less space to travel through, but just as many air molecules, so they will have to force their way through the space by accelerating. In the woods, hundreds of trees have been uprooted. Some tree trunks have been twisted and partially ripped apart. It's a bizarre occurrence, which can be explained using science.
La caractéristique des tornades, c'est quand même que c'est un phénomène très localisé avec des très grandes vitesses de vent. Et donc ça veut dire qu'en très peu de distance latéralement, vous allez avoir une très grande variation de la vitesse du vent.
In other words, that means that half of the tree suddenly finds itself at the heart of the tornado, where winds blow at over 300 kilometers per hour, whilst the other half is on the outside, where the winds are much slower. This results in the force applied on one half being much weaker than on the other, twisting the tree in on itself.
C'est souvent ce qu'on a tendance à faire si on veut arracher une herbe ou un truc comme ça. Si vous tirez juste vers le haut, c'est assez dur. Mais si vous, en plus, vous tournez, vous allez l'arracher beaucoup plus facilement.
Having left the woods, the tornado's at its most powerful when it arrives in the town of Ormont. It skims around a stadium and heads towards a housing estate.
Ça venait par là, ça venait comme ça. C'est pour ça que tout ce qui est maison comme ça a été balayé. Et tout ce qui est comme ça, ils ont été moins atteints.
Many houses are badly damaged. There's total panic, particularly as the noise emitted by the giant tornado is absolutely deafening.
Un sifflement comme un mirage qui passait. Vous avez cru un avion, un mirage ça sifflait fort, ça sifflait. Et il y a eu même des explosions.
These explosions are the sound of the tornado cutting through power cables, but the tornado also emits its own noise, a grumbling so low it's one of the lowest sounds on Earth.
Les sons émis par une tornade sont proches des infrasons. Ils sont émis par les vibrations ou les mouvements au sein de la tornade ou la friction entre la tornade et l'air environnant.
The swirling wind forms the wall of a gigantic tube which turns very quickly in on itself. Whilst turning, it disturbs the air around it, producing extremely low sounds. On top of this, there's a lot of noise from the debris being thrown around. Incredibly, this man has first-hand experience of the power of tornadoes.
J'ai vu le compte de carré bouger, la montée.
He was inside the vehicle when the dramatic event took place.
J'ai vu que j'étais soulevé en hauteur, puis après il a redescendu et je suis retombé, donc il est retombé par terre.
The tornado managed to lift up a motorhome weighing several tons. As the scientists explain, this is due to the strong suction effect caused by very low pressure.
Donc ça agit en fait comme un aspirateur. Les cloisons du tube, c'est l'air en rotation, mais au milieu, vous avez une dépression. Donc on peut très bien aspirer tout un tas d'objets, et selon la force de la tornade, on va aspirer des plus ou moins gros objets.
Fortunately, the motorhome quickly falls back down to the ground. Its owner was very lucky, as large tornadoes are capable of throwing cars or even trucks several hundred meters. Even more incredibly, objects can be transported much further if the tornado is powerful enough to transport them all the way to the jet stream.
Si un objet est aspiré, par exemple par la tornade, au niveau des vents d'altitude, ça va permettre à cet objet de voyager sur de grandes distances.
Some objects have even been found several hundred kilometers away, pushed along by winds reaching up to 500 kilometers an hour. In Ormont, the tornado continues its rampage and heads for the town's hospital. As you can see from these images, the tornado destroyed half of the roof, making an enormous surgical incision into the building. But how could it make such a clear cut? How can a tornado destroy an entire building without even touching objects just centimeters away? Once again, the explanation has to do with the difference in pressure between the center of the tornado and the pressure inside the building it's about to hit. The air in the building tries to escape to fill up the empty space inside the vortex. In order to do that, it will destroy anything directly in its path, but will leave everything else intact.
On peut très bien arracher la moitié d'une maison, mais une fois qu'elle est complètement ouverte, il n'y a plus de danger, puisque les pressions vont être équilibrées entre l'intérieur et l'extérieur. Donc d'où le phénomène qui peut être effectivement très localisé comme ça.
The higher the difference in pressure, the greater the damage. The tornado has moved its way through, leaving buildings half destroyed. Yet no one is out of danger, as its movements are completely unpredictable.
Alors on a déjà vu des tornades qui par exemple évoluaient à 30 km/h en vitesse de déplacement, qui tout à coup ont accéléré, sont passés à des vitesses bien plus importantes, pas loin des 100 km/h, et qui parfois tournent quasiment à angle droit. Donc vous êtes dans la maison, vous voyez le phénomène qui arrive sur vous, vous vous dites dans 5 minutes, je suis mort, et là, la tornade tourne et passe en fait sur la maison du voisin.
How can we explain the trajectory of a tornado? Scientists have identified many defining factors, but don't know its exact function.
Elle va se déplacer pour tout un tas de raisons qui nous sont pour la plupart inconnues, mais en tout cas, en fonction de la nature du sol sur lequel elle va évoluer, en fonction du nombre de débris qu'elle va avaler, en fonction de l'humidité de l'air dans la zone où elle évolue, et de tous ces facteurs qui font que la tornade peut en tout cas avoir une capacité d'évolution qui est totalement propre à elle-même, mais en plus, totalement imprévisible.
In the north of France, the tornado has already covered 12 kilometers and will cover nearly 7 more as it begins to weaken. Only after it has traveled through Ormont and Maubeuge will it finally disappear just before reaching the Belgian border. How does its disappearance come about? It's the precipitation that comes with the storm that will end up dampening and therefore killing it.
La phase d'affaiblissement d'une tornade, c'est lorsque les précipitations commencent à trop entourer la zone d'ascendance et à couper l'alimentation en air chaud et humide et à déstructurer la rotation de l'orage.
If the rain manages to completely surround the tornado, the warm, humid air which feeds it can no longer flow, and the tornado disappears. That's what eventually happened to the Ormont tornado, which in the space of a quarter of an hour killed 3 people and injured around 15. Over 1,000 buildings were damaged, of which 250 were rendered uninhabitable and 2 completely destroyed. It is now classed as the 3rd most dangerous tornado France has ever seen. Sadly, the events of that day were not an isolated incident within Europe. The meeting point between the cold air from England and the warmer southern air created several supercell storms at once. 2 tornadoes were detected in the Netherlands and 2 others in Germany, where 3 waterspouts also formed. Thankfully, these 7 tornadoes didn't cause any damage. This proves the fact that when all the conditions ideal for the creation of supercell storms unite, several tornadoes can be formed at once. This is what scientists call an outbreak.
On peut avoir parfois des séquences d'orages violents qui produisent de nombreuses tornades. Ça peut aller parfois jusqu'à plusieurs centaines de tornades en quelques jours.
Between the 22nd and the 31st of May 2008, an outbreak occurred in Tornado Alley in the USA. In this short period of time, 239 tornadoes formed, 170 of which formed within the first 3 days. So many tornadoes were able to form in such a short time due to the fact that all the conditions needed for the formation of several supercell storms were united.
D'une part, un gros différentiel de température, des masses d'air opposées, un courant jet stream en altitude, et puis des vents sens contraire.
As the scientists remind us, for a storm to become a supercell storm, that means one capable of creating a tornado, there are a few key elements needed. Firstly, the warm, humid air and the cold air must meet. Lighter than the latter, the warm air rises rapidly. Altitude winds must then be blowing in an opposing direction to the winds closer to the ground. This will begin to rotate the rapidly rising warm air, creating a column of rotating wind. The column starts bigger, then begins to constrict. The beginnings of a tornado form at the base of the storm, reaching down until it touches the ground. On the morning of the 22nd of May 2008, in the American Weather Center dedicated to detecting tornadoes, weather forecasters are on high alert. They have detected some particularly violent storms.
We start sometimes a week in advance looking at these systems coming in from a pattern recognition point of view. In other words, we've seen this pattern before. We know that it's conducive for severe weather.
With 800 tornadoes hitting Tornado Alley each year, a particularly efficient alert system has been put in place by scientists. Warning messages are played on a loop by radio stations across 5 states. For instance, in the small town of Windsor in Colorado. That day, Maggie Barnhill hadn't been listening to the radio. She had no idea what was about to unfold. Late that afternoon, her life would change within seconds.
Just come home, I picked up my son from kindergarten. I came in and just had some soup, and right after I finished it, the electricity went out and the hail was coming down.
At 6:26 p.m., the tornado formed 35 kilometers south of the town, accompanied by a huge downpour of huge hailstones the size of baseballs.
Il faut savoir quand même qu'un grêlon, au-delà de 6 cm de diamètre, est potentiellement létal. Quand il va descendre, il peut tomber à des vitesses qui avoisinent les 180-190 km/h.
However, it's not the hailstones which will pose the most danger. The newly formed tornado is one of the most dangerous kind. Scientists call these multi-vortex tornadoes.
Les tornades multivortex, ça peut aller jusqu'à typiquement 2 à 5 petits vortex secondaires qui se développent au sein d'un vaste vortex.
If you imagine several smaller tornadoes inside the Windsor tornado, you may think these smaller whirlwinds might not pose much danger compared to the main vortex. However, you would be wrong.
Les vents les plus forts ont été mesurés au cœur d'une tornade, une multivortex. Et là, au cœur d'un vortex secondaire, la vitesse a été mesurée à 484 km/h.
With speeds of nearly 500 kilometers per hour, though secondary vortexes may be small, their potential for destruction is huge. Why? Because the speed at which they turn is increased by the speed of the main vortex.
L'énergie de rotation d'ensemble de la tornade principale, ils arrivent à la concentrer sur une échelle plus réduite, mais donc avec une très forte intensité.
Experts say that this can increase the rotating wind speed by up to 160 kilometers an hour. In Windsor, when the tornado reaches Maggie's house, she takes seconds to react.
Both my chairs went off my deck and they just went straight up. And I went, we gotta go. And I just took my son and we zipped around the corner and went down the stairs, and the second step down, the glass just blew out.
Maggie and her son may not have lived to tell the tale were it not for her quick reactions.
Dans le cas où un phénomène de ce type, donc une tornade F4 avec une telle vitesse et une telle rapidité de progression va arriver vers soi, la seule solution est de trouver de toute façon un abri sous terre, une cave.
When a tornado hits, buildings explode outwards as the low pressure in the vortex has very strong suction, but not underground.
La tornade, si elle arrive vraiment dessus, on va subir uniquement la partie aspirateur verticale.
Luckily, the tornado passes by quickly and Maggie and her son are safe, but just a few hundred meters away, the damage is significantly worse.
We were in the cellar, and it was loud, 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 and sounded like stuff falling on it, and it was just loud, roaring noise.
Living proof of the importance of taking refuge underground, this resident's house was completely destroyed. She escaped with her life thanks to a storm shelter she had built. Those who live in Tornado Alley are used to natural disasters like this and must be well prepared. They know exactly how to react, and if caught out away from home, they take refuge in basements of hotels or shops. In Windsor, the tornado continues on its path for more than 20 kilometers. The toll of this horrific outbreak will turn out to be devastating. Thousands of vehicles and buildings destroyed, 13 deaths, and several $1 billion of damage. Tornadoes can take on many different forms. Specialists have even studied tornadoes made of fire.
Ça va être l'air très chaud qui est emporté par les flammes, et en montant brutalement, il va se mettre en rotation.
Scientists don't class fire whirls in the same category as tornadoes, as they're not linked to storms. They do, however, also depend on differences in pressure created by differences in temperature.
Pour compenser en fait les écarts thermiques, l'atmosphère se met à tourbillonner pour ramener du chaud vers le froid et du froid vers le chaud. Et donc ça fait un tourbillon qui s'emballe parfois. Il peut même parfois quitter la zone de feu d'origine et se déplacer à l'extérieur.
It's not yet known whether one day we'll be able to predict tornadoes. Scientists already have many resources at their disposal which are able to detect potentially dangerous storms.
Really, the prediction stage of severe weather evolves over time. It's really important for us to draw all these tools together that we have available to us: radar data, satellite data, all the spotters in the field, and the training that goes along with that.
On the ground, the most well-known of these resources are tornado chasers, who inform the American weather services. But given how dangerous this can be, new detection methods are being developed, which are able to monitor supercell storms from a safe distance. One of the most commonly used tools is a Doppler radar.
Un radar Doppler va envoyer des ondes en direction des nuages. Ces ondes vont se réfléchir, rebondir sur les petites gouttelettes d'eau, sur les cristaux de glace qui sont présents dans les nuages.
As the waves rebound, they return to the radar, providing the scientists with a wealth of information. For example, they are able to calculate how far away a tornado is based on how long it takes the waves to bounce back. It's thanks to the Doppler effect, which gives its name to the radar, that the scientists can take their calculations even further.
L'effet Doppler est un phénomène physique dont on a tous fait l'expérience dans la vie quotidienne. Lorsqu'une ambulance se rapproche de nous, le son qu'elle émet nous apparaît aigu. Quand elle arrive à notre hauteur puis s'éloigne de nous, la perception que l'on a est un son plus grave. Ce que l'on constate, c'est que la fréquence de l'onde sonore n'est pas la même si l'objet se rapproche de nous ou s'éloigne de nous.
By analyzing the different frequencies of the waves received by the radar, the scientists can find out which direction the tornado is moving in and at what speed. It's thanks to different techniques that the scientists are finding out more and more about tornadoes. But for the moment, a solution for protecting against them completely remains less science and more science fiction.
Il est quand même extrêmement difficile de prévoir avec précision une tornade. On peut prévoir l'orage et déterminer plus ou moins le type d'orage et en fonction savoir si cet orage, par exemple une supercellule, a de très grandes chances de donner une tornade. Maintenant, prévoir avec précision une tornade, on n'est absolument pas en mesure de le faire. D'autant plus qu'il y a tout un tas de facteurs qui font que les modèles évoluent constamment. Ne serait-ce que par exemple l'adjonction dans l'atmosphère des centaines de millions de mètres cubes de polluants atmosphériques de toute nature.
The toxic gases we release into the atmosphere interfere with the signals retrieved by the scientists, as well as changing the behavior of atmospheric phenomena. Their effect on tornadoes is unknown. Tornadoes remain one of the most powerful natural disasters on the planet.
Il est hors de question d'affronter un monstre pareil, un phénomène aussi destructeur qu'une tornade.
They can travel at 100 kilometers per hour and are made up of the fastest winds on Earth. On land as well as over the sea, tens of them can tear through a country at the same time, sometimes surrounded by hailstones the size of melons, which fall from the sky. They rip apart houses like paper, launching full-size trucks kilometers into the air. Scientists may never be able to tell exactly where and when these forces of nature will strike. One recent American study proves that outbreaks are becoming more and more common. For now, tornadoes will remain one of the most destructive phenomena on the planet. Cyclones. These phenomena are the most powerful natural disasters on Earth. A cyclone is an immense cloudy mass which rotates in on itself and causes incredibly powerful surges of wind.
Imaginez-vous dans votre maison où même les murs porteurs vibrent. C'est-à-dire, vous avez l'impression d'être dans un tremblement de terre. Vous êtes dans une machine à laver.
Cyclones are only formed over warm oceans. They draw an enormous amount of energy from this warm water, which they then release in the form of wind or torrential rain. These gusts can reach up to 400 kilometers an hour.
Le cyclone Gamède en 2007, il est tombé de l'ordre de 4900 mm d'eau en 4 jours. Alors on va le traduire autrement. Ça équivaut à peu près à 7 années de pluie à Paris en 4 jours.
Faced with such power, scientists have come together to try to limit the impact of this force of nature. But how do cyclones really work? And can we predict them? How much damage can they really cause? To discover more, we head to the island of Saint Martin in the French West Indies. This is where Hurricane Irma caused the most destruction at the end of August 2017.
L'énergie dégagée par le cyclone Irma, ça correspond à la moitié d'une forte saison cyclonique où on a en général de l'ordre de 6 cyclones. Donc on voit qu'on a eu affaire à un monstre.
Hurricane Katrina, which devastated the south of the United States in the summer of 2005, will reveal that the damages caused by a hurricane are not solely dependent on wind or rain.
La mer donc s'est comportée comme un tsunami et rentrée à l'intérieur des terres. Et comme on a une terre extrêmement plate, enfin le relief est extrêmement plat, l'eau de mer a pénétré jusqu'à 100-150 km à l'intérieur des terres.
Finally, we will attempt to find out if global warming could increase the chances of cyclones reaching our continent in the near future. While this may seem impossible, the exceptional appearance of Hurricane Ophelia on the European coastline in October 2017 suggests otherwise.
Ophélia, c'est effectivement un événement remarquable puisqu'il a gardé son caractère cyclone tropical pratiquement jusqu'à l'Irlande.
So, have scientists uncovered the truth behind cyclones? How will they look in the future? Where will they strike? And could they do even more damage? Take a look at these extraordinary accumulations of energy in the sky. These masses can measure almost twice the size of France, and their power is unparalleled. These masses are in fact cyclones.
Un cyclone, à lui-même, produit pratiquement autant d'énergie que l'ensemble des sources d'énergie existant sur Terre au même instant.
But first of all, what is a cyclone? Surprisingly, the definition is much broader than one would generally think.
Donc un cyclone, c'est une dépression, donc c'est une région de basse pression autour de laquelle on a des vents forts.
Depression is a term often mentioned on weather forecasts. It is a zone in which the atmospheric pressure is weaker than in other areas. Why? In fact, it all begins with the sun. Since the Earth is round, solar rays cannot reach the Earth in all places at the same angle. As such, the amount of energy reaching the tropics is different to the amount reaching the poles. In the polar regions, the rays are slanted, so they emit less energy.
Au niveau de l'équateur, les faisceaux lumineux arrivent perpendiculairement à la surface. Ils sont donc bien concentrés. Alors qu'au niveau des pôles, ils arrivent en biais et la lumière se répartit sur une plus grosse surface. Et comme elle se répartit sur une plus grosse surface, finalement, il fait plus froid au pôle qu'à l'équateur.
On our planet, the energy emitted by solar rays is measured by temperature. Naturally, there are areas where the air is warmer or colder. Air reacts differently depending on the change in temperature. Physicists are very familiar with this concept, commonly known as atmospheric convection.
La convection atmosphérique, c'est le fait que les masses d'air se mettent en mouvement à l'intérieur de l'atmosphère. Et elles se mettent en mouvement essentiellement à cause des différences de chaleur ou des différences de pression, ce qui est souvent lié.
The air surrounding us is a gas. The heat transmitted to it by solar rays is energy. This energy recharges the air molecules, which then begin to move around. Once they start moving around, they take up more space and spread apart from each other. The area thus becomes less dense.
L'air chaud est plus léger que l'air froid, et donc le poids de l'atmosphère sur la surface est moins important, et donc on a une dépression qui va se produire.
The lighter air rises, creating less pressure on the surface, and that's not all. As the air rises, it leaves space behind in this low pressure zone. This creates a draft, also known as suction.
Une zone de basse pression, c'est du vide. Donc l'air veut combler le vide et va des hautes pressions aux basses pressions. Et ça, c'est le phénomène de vent.
So a depression is a low pressure zone that generates airflow in the form of wind. This is a common phenomenon. In fact, this is the main cause of bad weather in this country. However, bad weather does not always lead to cyclones.
Un cyclone, c'est une notion très générale, donc il y a plein de phénomènes dans l'atmosphère qui sont des cyclones, mais généralement, quand on parle de cyclones, on parle en fait de cyclones tropicaux.
Known for their powers of violence and destruction, these forces of nature make the headlines several times each year. But these are not the only factors distinguishing cyclones from other depressions. With a particular focus on their formation, specialists have established precise characteristics to define tropical cyclones. To find out more, we take a look at the summer of 2017. This was a particularly unusual summer due to the number of hurricanes that struck the United States.
On a eu au cours de l'été 2017 une conjonction de phénomènes favorables qui ont malheureusement amené un espèce de rail de cyclone directement axé sur les Antilles pendant 15 jours, 3 semaines environ.
Of all these cyclones, Hurricane Irma was the most violent. It destroyed a large part of the Caribbean, ending up on the American coastline at the beginning of September 2017.
Pour avoir vu peut-être quelques reportages sur l'impact qu'une bombe peut provoquer, c'est vraiment le sentiment qu'on a eu, on a l'impression qu'il y avait eu un bombardement sur l'île de Saint-Martin.
Irma was a hurricane, not a cyclone. Is there a difference?
On parle de typhon, de cyclone ou d'ouragan. C'est la même chose. Simplement, on leur donne 3 noms différents, c'est tout.
The only difference is the location in which the phenomenon takes place. The term cyclone or tropical cyclone is reserved for the Indian Ocean and the South Pacific. Hurricanes appear in the North Atlantic and Northeast Pacific. And finally, the term typhoon is used in the Northwest Pacific. Regardless of their location, these phenomena are all formed in what specialists call tropical zones.
Les bandes tropicales, c'est des régions qui se trouvent entre 10 degrés et 30 degrés de latitude au nord et au sud de l'équateur.
All tropical cyclones are born in this region due to the higher temperatures reigning in this part of the world. But this is not the only reason. Air is not the only element able to create a depression. Seawater can also fill this role if it is warm enough.
Pour qu'un cyclone puisse se développer, il faut que l'eau soit supérieure à 26 degrés et demi dans les 50 premiers mètres de l'océan.
What happens when water becomes heated? The liquid water turns into a gas in the form of water vapor. This is the principle of evaporation. As water vapor is less dense, it tends to rise.
Les molécules bougent beaucoup plus et quand elles bougent beaucoup plus, elles prennent plus de place et plus de place, ça fait quelque chose qui est plus léger finalement.
In the planet's tropical zones, heat transmits its energy into both air and water molecules. Consequently, the warm and humid air rises even faster, and the pressure in these zones is much lower. Because of this, the suction is significantly stronger, and the rising winds become increasingly violent. This explains the incredible power of cyclones. At the end of the summer of 2017, Alexandre Godefroy was on holiday with his friends on the island of Saint Martin. It is only a few days before disaster strikes that he first hears about Hurricane Irma.
Donc nous, 4-5 jours avant, on sait qu'il y a un ouragan qui arrive. On ne se rend pas compte que ça va être un monstre comme Irma tel qu'il a annoncé. Donc la vie suit son cours. Il fait beau, 3-4 jours avant, on continue à sortir, on va à la plage.
Alexandre cannot imagine what is to come. Irma takes a drastic turn for the worst and turns into a machine of destruction.
L'énergie dégagée par le cyclone Irma, en une dizaine de jours, ça correspond à la moitié d'une forte saison cyclonique où on a en général de l'ordre de 6 cyclones. Donc on voit qu'on a eu affaire à un monstre.
Cyclones are characterized using the Saffir-Simpson scale. To be considered a cyclone, the winds of the phenomenon must exceed 118 kilometers per hour. It is then classed from categories 1 to 5, where wind speeds can reach more than 250 kilometers per hour.
On sait d'avance qu'on va avoir des destructions de bâtiments. Il va quasiment y avoir pas de survivants si les gens sont à l'extérieur.
Hurricane Irma was a Category 5 hurricane, the most powerful hurricane recorded in the North Atlantic since Hurricane Allen in 1980. In early September 2017, over a period of 6 days, Irma kills 134 people and causes billions of dollars worth of damage in her trajectory from the West Indies to the United States. However, Irma was actually formed on the 29th of August 2017, 6,000 kilometers away.
Irma est née un peu à l'ouest des îles du Cap-Vert et a profité de sa traversée pour s'intensifier. Et en rencontrant des conditions très favorables, c'est-à-dire un océan qui était assez chaud, plus chaud que la normale, beaucoup d'humidité dans l'atmosphère, donc a pu s'intensifier assez rapidement.
At the end of the summer, the temperature of the Atlantic Ocean is much higher than normal, 2 to 3 degrees above average. As a result, water vapor rises very quickly, powered by the energy transmitted to it from the surrounding heat. Once it reaches a certain altitude, another physical process is set in motion. condensation.
La condensation, c'est le phénomène de transformation de la vapeur d'eau en gouttelettes d'eau. Et ça arrive dans les couches supérieures de l'atmosphère où l'air est plus froid. Et donc quand l'air humide se transforme en gouttelettes d'eau, ça fait des nuages et plus tard des précipitations.
Large amounts of rain start to fall from the sky around this low pressure area, but that's not all. As we have seen, seawater turns into water vapor when its molecules are charged with heat energy and are thus beginning to move around. When water vapor condenses to become a liquid again, the process is reversed.
Quand on transforme de l'eau vapeur avec beaucoup d'énergie en eau liquide avec moins d'énergie, eh bien cette énergie doit partir quelque part, elle part en chaleur, c'est-à-dire qu'elle va réchauffer l'air qui est autour.
To sum up, a low pressure zone above a warm ocean attracts air in the form of wind. This wind is charged with humidity and rapidly increases in altitude. When it reaches the upper layers of the atmosphere, the humid air becomes a liquid again by releasing heat, which warms up the surrounding air. A tropical cyclone is deemed a perfect climatic phenomenon because this warm air reinforces the low pressure zone, attracting even more air, which will eventually also be charged with humidity, thus restarting the cycle.
C'est extrêmement efficace puisque une fois qu'on a ce système-là, on parle d'un système auto-entretenu, c'est-à-dire que plus il s'intensifie, plus il donne des éléments pour s'intensifier à nouveau. Donc on peut créer comme ça un emballement.
During the summer of 2017, Lisa Durand was working for one of the largest hotels in St. Martin. Her responsibilities involved staying informed of the weather forecasts provided by Météo France.
Le premier tracé a vu juste en fait, et il montrait bien que Saint-Martin allait être touché de plein fouet en catégorie 5. Et Saint-Barthélemy aussi, et que ça allait être juste énorme. Donc les gens ont commencé à prendre peur.
Fear rises among the people of St. Martin after the weather services predict that Hurricane Irma will pass over their island. Everyone remembers what happened 22 years before. Hurricane Lewis, a Category 4 storm, whose winds reached 270 kilometers an hour, almost destroyed the 100 square kilometer island. At the end of August 2017, Hurricane Irma is still being formed. On the 27th, the phenomenon is classified as a tropical depression, where winds do not exceed 63 kilometers per hour. But the cyclonic machine is nearly ready. All that's left is for the hurricane to start rotating in on itself. According to satellite images, a cyclone is essentially a gigantic vortex of wind and rain. Why? This is due to another physical phenomenon discovered by researchers nearly 200 years ago, known as the Coriolis effect.
La force de Coriolis, c'est une force qui est liée à la rotation de la Terre sur elle-même. Donc c'est une force qui va avoir un rôle important dans le climat puisqu'elle va dévier les masses d'air ou les masses d'eau.
The Earth turns eastward on an axis that passes through the poles. A complete rotation always takes 24 hours, regardless of where you are on the planet. However, the distance in relation to the axis is not always the same.
Un tour au niveau de l'équateur, c'est 40 000 km. Bien, à Paris, plus au nord, la distance est plus petite et c'est uniquement 26 000 km.
26,000 kilometers in 24 hours equates to a speed of 1,100 kilometers per hour. This figure reaches 1,700 kilometers per hour at the equator. Imagine a mass of air close to Paris, propelled eastward at a speed of 1,100 kilometers an hour. If this mass moves south towards the equator, it will reach a zone which rotates at 1,700 kilometers an hour, a difference of 600 kilometers an hour. Because the mass is moving at a slower pace, it seems like it is moving to the west.
Dans notre hémisphère, des masses d'air qui partent du sud, elles vont être déviées vers l'est, alors que des masses d'air qui viennent du nord, elles vont être déviées vers l'ouest.
This principle is also applied to weather phenomena. The Coriolis effect gives cyclones their rotation. On the 30th of August 2017, a standard depression in the Atlantic changes from a tropical storm, the stage just before a hurricane, to a Category 1 hurricane in only a few hours. As it gradually moves westward, it gains power and intensity.
Le système, en traversant l'Atlantique, il va au fur et à mesure pomper de plus en plus d'énergie de la mer, de l'eau qui est très très chaude, à plus de 26 degrés, et il va alimenter, il va devenir de plus en plus violent.
Over the following days, Irma continues to intensify until it becomes a monster of destruction.
Son intensité maximum, c'est la veille de son arrivée sur Saint-Barthélemy et Saint-Barth, dans une situation très large, très développée. Et donc c'est là où on a eu le phénomène le plus intense.
On the 5th of September, Irma is classified as a Category 5 storm, with winds raging at 279 kilometers an hour. Irma's speed is equal to that of a high-speed train. Worst of all, its dimensions are unprecedented. It has a diameter of more than 500 kilometers over a surface of 335,000 kilometers squared. That's almost the entirety of metropolitan France. On the island of St. Martin, the maximum alert is sounded. In the West Indies, this is known as a violet alert.
La Violette, elle vous dit, restez cloîtrés chez vous, ne bougez pas, sans contre-indication, votre vie est en jeu.
At 2 a.m. on the 6th of September, the first areas affected by the storm are the islands of Antigua and Barbuda. Irma keeps gaining intensity, boosted by the exceedingly warm waters of the Atlantic Ocean.
Sur l'Atlantique Nord, en moyenne, on avait des 28-29 degrés, ce qui est 2 à 3 degrés au-dessus de ce qu'on a habituellement en température d'eau de mer. Et là, quand vous êtes à 2 à 3 degrés au-dessus des normales, vous mettez à disposition du cyclone des quantités d'énergie phénoménales.
The storm then hits the islands of St. Barthélemy and St. Martin. Night falls and the weather gets progressively worse. The wind and rain gradually get stronger. The first damages begin to appear.
Finalement, ce que vous observez dehors, c'est des voitures qui changent de place. C'est toutes les enseignes du casino qui étaient à côté de notre hôtel qui commencent à tomber, des toitures qui commencent à soulever, alors qu'on n'est pas encore dans la partie puissante du cyclone.
4 hours later, all hell breaks loose. The most destructive part of the cyclone reaches the island. Specialists call this the eye wall.
C'est un mur de nuages qui entoure la région centrale du cyclone qu'on appelle l'œil. Et il est caractérisé par de fortes précipitations et des vents très très forts. C'est là où il y a les vents les plus forts dans le cyclone.
The center of the cyclone is a very low pressure zone. The warm air is charged with humidity, so it rises and weighs almost nothing. Once the air is propelled higher, it cools down and forms clouds that rotate around the center of the cyclone. This is where the wind speed breaks records.
On sait qu'on a mesuré du 295 km/h, ça c'était observé, mesuré, mais on estime qu'on a eu des rafales de l'ordre de 350 km/h, au vu des dégâts qu'on a pu constater sur Saint-Martin et Saint-Barthélemy.
The worst part is that the winds inside a cyclone are irregular in terms of their speed and direction. Why? Scientists have several theories.
Si vous regardez l'écoulement d'une rivière sous un pont, vous allez constater que ce n'est pas un écoulement régulier, mais qu'il y a des petits tourbillons qui se développent. Bon. L'air, c'est pareil, l'air est toujours un peu turbulent. Quand vous voyez le vent qui soulève des feuilles, il y a des petits tourbillons qui se produisent.
The increase in warm and humid air in the eye wall are not consistent with each other, and these discrepancies can create very dangerous gusts of wind.
On a des endroits où ça monte plus vite et plus qu'à d'autres endroits. Donc on dit qu'on a des tours de convection. Et en fait, ces tours, elles sont associées à des mini-cyclones. Donc on a des mouvements d'air autour de ces tours de convection.
Mini-cyclones or worse. The whirling movements can become concentrated in the center of the eye wall to form tornadoes. Tornadoes are the most violent phenomena ever recorded on Earth. Although St. Martin is spared from any tornadoes this time, the hellish ordeal only gets worse.
Imaginez-vous dans votre maison où même les murs porteurs vibrent. C'est-à-dire vous avez l'impression d'être dans un tremblement de terre. Vous êtes dans une machine à laver.
Along with the mini-cyclones moving on the eye wall of the main phenomenon, the constructions on land also start to pose problems. Roads positioned in between buildings become bottlenecks for the wind.
Quand on prend un tuyau qui contient de l'eau et qu'on le pince, eh bien on fait un jet plus étroit mais avec une vitesse beaucoup plus grande. Pour l'air, c'est exactement la même chose. Ça se comporte comme un fluide incompressible. Donc quand on le force à s'écouler dans un espace restreint, eh bien il accélère.
These accelerations are the main causes of damage. The new gusts of wind have an even greater power of destruction than the steady winds. moving at a rate of nearly 300 kilometers an hour.
Plus les rafales sont fortes, plus ça va donner des coups de butoir qui vont casser des tas d'objets, qui vont coucher des objets. Alors quand je parle d'objets, je parle d'arbres, je parle de maisons, je parle de voitures, je parle de camions, tout ce genre de choses.
With such exponential wind power, the damages are even more shocking. The wind's capacity for destruction increases at an even faster rate than its speed.
Quand vous doublez la vitesse du vent, vous augmentez par 4, multipliez par 4 les dégâts, en général à peu près.
Although the hurricane's internal winds reach record speeds, Irma actually moves very slowly. This is very bad news.
L'ouragan Irma se déplaçait plutôt lentement. Elle se déplaçait à 26 km/h, ce qui correspond à peu près à 7 mètres par seconde. Et un cyclone, plus il avance lentement, et plus il est dangereux.
Indeed, the slower the phenomenon moves, the more time it has to wreak havoc. And even though the winds can be very destructive, they are not the main cause of the damages.
Le plus marquant, ce sont les précipitations, puisqu'il y a d'énormes quantités de pluie qui peuvent tomber et un cyclone peut produire l'équivalent d'une année ou plusieurs années de pluie à tel endroit.
All the humidity drawn to the top of the cyclone falls back down in record-breaking quantities of rain. The most impressive figures are regularly recorded on the island of La Réunion when it is struck by such a phenomenon.
Le cyclone Gamède en 2007, il est tombé de l'ordre de 4900 mm d'eau en 4 jours. Alors on va le traduire autrement. Ça équivaut à peu près à 7 années de pluie à Paris en 4 jours.
The extraordinary quantities of rain recorded on the French island in the Indian Ocean are not only due to the power of cyclones, but also to the morphology of the land. La Réunion is shaped like a giant cone, so its form accentuates the amount of precipitation it receives.
L'île est montagneuse, très très montagneuse, et donc les masses d'air sont obligées de monter en plus d'être déjà chargées d'humidité. Donc cette ascendance verticale crée de la condensation et donc des précipitations très très fortes qui sont encore plus fortes que les régions avoisinantes sur la mer, quoi.
At 500 millimeters, the precipitation recorded on the island of Saint Martin during Hurricane Irma is much lower than the amounts usually measured on La Réunion. However, 500 millimeters is equal to 500 liters of water per square meter. That is the same as 3 full bathtubs per meter, falling in only a few hours. Such quantities of water can cause considerable damage. Propelled by the wind, the rain can get in everywhere. After taking refuge in a bathroom on the second floor of the hotel, Lisa Duran remembers that day well.
On se rend compte à un moment donné qu'il y a de l'eau sur le sol de la salle de bain. On avait mis un matelas, le matelas flottait. Il y avait plus de 15 cm d'eau. On avait les pieds dans l'eau.
The gusts of wind and rain produce a deafening roar, but noise is not the only thing preventing the victims from hearing correctly. The difference in pressure also has a significant role to play.
Vous avez vos oreilles qui se bougent, vous entendez mal du coup. Ça vous fait mal comme si vous aviez une otite.
It's the same effect as being on a plane. On the island of Saint Martin, hours go by and the damages accumulate. Finally, near 6 o'clock, there is a sudden lull.
Imaginez-vous, ces bruits assourdissants, les murs qui tremblent, et en l'espace de 30 secondes, le calme part.
Dazed and in shock, Alexandre does not immediately realize that he is now in the center of the phenomenon, the eye of the hurricane.
Alors l'œil du cyclone, c'est la région qui se trouve donc au centre du cyclone. C'est une région dans laquelle il n'y a pas de précipitation et dans laquelle il n'y a pas de vent. Donc parfois même, on voit des images de l'œil du cyclone, donc il peut faire beau.
It is hard to believe that the eye is surrounded by the most violent winds, yet the area inside it, which can stretch over dozens of kilometers, is relatively calm. How is this possible? Why do the winds not enter the eye? To understand, we take another look at how cyclones function. On the one hand, the low-pressure area in the center of the cyclone attracts the winds. On the other, due to the Earth's rotation, the Coriolis effect forces these winds to turn in on themselves. Any rotating object is drawn to the exterior of the cyclone due to a phenomenon known as centrifugal force.
Quand on est sur une route qui va tout droit et que la voiture tourne vers la gauche, en fait, notre corps voudrait continuer tout droit. Et il ne peut pas. Donc il ressent une pseudo-force qui l'entraîne à l'extérieur du virage, et cette pseudo-force, c'est la force centrifuge.
In the center of the cyclone, the force of attraction created by low pressure drawing winds to the center and the centrifugal force pushing the winds to the outside balance each other out. As a result, the eye of the hurricane is protected. The inside is dominated by a sense of calm.
On commence à sortir et là on voit que c'est pas que l'hôtel qui est détruit, c'est tout le quartier, c'est toute l'île.
Despite this devastating realization, there is no time to despair. The eye's crossing does not last long, barely 45 minutes. The only option is to return to shelter. Although the majority of the buildings have already suffered grave damages, more destruction is on the horizon. The winds are still just as strong, and on top of that, they have changed direction.
Juste après le passage de l'œil, en fait, on a une inversion du sens du vent, c'est-à-dire qu'on a une déviation de ce sens à 180 degrés. Donc si, par exemple, le vent venait de la droite, juste après que l'œil soit passé, il vient de la gauche.
The winds in the eye wall of the cyclone rotate around the center of the eye. Therefore, if they initially turn from right to left after passing over the axis, they will then turn from left to right. The powerful gusts of wind will now strike the other side of the building still standing.
Donc les structures étant fragilisées déjà par un vent et les forçant dans un certain sens, souvent sont détruites lorsque le vent change de direction, puisque là on va avoir un effet qui va être tout à fait différent.
On the island of Saint Martin, Alexandre experiences this phenomenon first-hand from his hotel room on the top floor.
À une ou deux reprises, on a vu le toit se soulever de quelques centimètres. Donc, et là, on se dit, si la charpente s'en va, on est fini, quoi.
After 3 more hours of devastating winds and destruction, Hurricane Irma finally moved away from the island of Saint Martin. Alexandre, Lisa and their friends all made it out alive. They were extremely lucky, as the damages on the island were truly catastrophic. With winds blowing at an average of 300 kilometers an hour over several hours, between 65 and 95% of the French part of the island is said to have been destroyed. 15 people lost their lives on Saint Martin and Saint Barthélemy. Unfortunately, Irma's journey is still far from finished. The hurricane continues its journey northwest, passing Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. It is still at maximum intensity.
Il est monté de catégorie 5, c'est le maximum, pendant plus de 78 heures, c'est un record.
Irma is so powerful that the American authorities take extreme measures when the hurricane heads towards Florida. 6 million people are evacuated. That's 3 times the population of inner Paris. Fortunately, on the 10th of September, just off the coast of Florida, Irma is downgraded to a Category 4 storm, with its winds still reaching 215 kilometers an hour. The hurricane quickly begins to lose power and finishes its journey 2 days later in the state of Alabama. In the end, Irma is said to have caused the deaths of 90 people in the United States. The storm was also responsible for severe water and electricity cuts. It was terrible, but it could have been a lot worse if the authorities hadn't taken such radical measures. It should be said that the population is more accustomed to hurricanes in this region. Some of them are truly devastating, like Hurricane Katrina, which struck Louisiana at the end of August 2005. Hurricane Katrina is still a nightmare for many Americans because it caused the deaths of more than 1,800 people and left millions homeless, particularly in New Orleans. Why was Hurricane Katrina more destructive than Hurricane Irma? To find out, we retrace the history of this force of nature. Hurricane Katrina came to be on the 23rd of August 2005 over the archipelago of the Bahamas. The phenomenon quickly turns from a tropical depression into a tropical storm, and it is in this form that Katrina briefly strikes the south of Florida on the 25th of August. The following day, everything changes when the storm reaches the Gulf of Mexico.
Katrina est passée sur un tourbillon chaud qui avait une profondeur d'environ une centaine de mètres, donc un énorme réservoir thermique sur lequel les vents ont pu puiser et donc ont renforcé l'intensité de Katrina. Et ça s'est produit la veille de son arrivée sur la Nouvelle-Orléans.
Scientists estimate that for a cyclone to appear, seawater must be at a temperature of more than 26.5 degrees over a depth of 50 meters. Here, these conditions are met. Hurricane Katrina quickly gains force and turns into a Category 5 storm in only 2 days. Katrina causes the maximum amount of damage due to another agent of destruction present in all cyclones, the ocean. The ocean ends up rising more than 15 meters, reaching the height of a 5-story building.
La mer, donc soulevée comme ceci, s'est comportée comme un tsunami, est rentrée à l'intérieur des terres, et comme on a une terre extrêmement plate, enfin le relief est extrêmement plat, l'eau de mer a pénétré jusqu'à 100-150 km à l'intérieur des terres.
150 kilometers, that is almost equivalent to the English Channel flowing inland and reaching the Parisian suburbs. We have seen the potential damage caused by the wind and precipitation inside a cyclone, but even when these elements are at their most powerful, they are not the only factors responsible for ultimate destruction. Every cyclone is accompanied by a rise in sea level. This phenomenon depends on several elements. The first is wind.
Les vents du cyclone, en fait, ils poussent des paquets d'eau qui vont être responsables de vagues et d'une élévation du niveau de l'eau sur le littoral. Donc c'est l'effet des vents du cyclone.
The gusts from the cyclone push the ocean forward. Specialists call these storm surges. Waves, known as storm swells, are also created. Consequently, a second element is added into the mix due to the low pressure dominating the center of the hurricane.
Le simple fait qu'un cyclone, c'est une dépression, ça va aspirer, entre guillemets, ça va faire remonter le niveau de la mer de plusieurs mètres.
In a depression, the pressure exerted on the surface is less significant, and when this surface is made of water, it rises. If the pressure level drops, you get storm surges and swells. When put together, all of these factors can cause an exceptional rise in sea level.
Comme ça, vous pouvez avoir des niveaux qui peuvent dépasser parfois par 20 mètres par endroit. On peut avoir des effets vraiment catastrophiques.
On the 29th of August 2005, the equivalent of a tsunami flooded Louisiana and quickly swept away 75% of New Orleans. A large part of the city had been built below sea level, and the only thing protecting it was a 4-meter-high dam. This dam was quickly submerged under a crushing wall of water, and the rise in water continued for several days.
You're not going to be able to get no supplies or anything. You sure? The water's going to continue coming up till at least tomorrow.
These floods are accompanied by mudslides. Hundreds of thousands of people lose their homes and are forced to live in temporary housing for months and even years. Although Hurricane Katrina had declined in intensity by this point, the storm would continue its trajectory for thousands of kilometers over the US and Canada, finally finishing its journey in Quebec on the 31st of August. The result, more than $108 billion worth of damage. We've seen the birth of a hurricane, but how do we explain its death? Scientists believe there are several factors involved. Firstly, the loss of contact with the storm's primary source, the ocean.
L'ouragan, son carburant, c'est l'océan chaud. Donc si jamais il atteint une terre, si jamais il quitte l'océan, il va être privé de carburant. Et donc il va s'affaiblir et disparaître au fur et à mesure.
Without its energy source, the cyclone has to consume the energy it has stored. This energy is found in the form of humidity. The storm cannot die instantly. Instead, it deteriorates at a gradual pace. This explains why, in Katrina's case, the depression continued for nearly 3,000 kilometers. Hurricanes have even been known to stagnate between land and sea. A situation like this can quickly become catastrophic. This was the case for Hurricane Harvey, which reached the Texan coastline on the 25th of August 2017.
Étant stationnaire sur la côte du Texas, il avait entre guillemets un pied au-dessus de l'océan, donc il pompait de l'énergie et de l'eau, et de l'autre côté, le pied était sur le Texas. Et là, il redéversait toutes les quantités d'eau qui arrivaient.
Over the course of 2 days, Harvey continued to flood the south of the United States before moving fully inland and disappearing for good. Another element that weakens hurricanes is the morphology of the land.
Le vent qui passe sur un relief un petit peu compliqué va subir plus de turbulences, plus de frottements, donc il va avoir tendance à s'atténuer.
Friction reduces the wind speed inside a cyclone. This, along with the drop in its energy source, forces it to disappear. The final element is what scientists call wind shear.
Le cisaillement du vent, c'est la variation de l'intensité du vent et de la direction du vent avec l'altitude à travers l'atmosphère.
For example, by blowing more intensely at a higher altitude, the wind pushes the warm and humid air to the side. Wind shear has a key role to play in destroying tornadoes, so it can also destroy cyclones.
On peut imaginer un cyclone comme étant une toupie, une toupie qui tourne comme ça, et le cisaillement, c'est quelque chose qui va incliner la toupie. Et une toupie qui tourne pas droit, généralement, elle dure pas très longtemps.
That's it for hurricanes, the weather phenomena that devastate the North American coastlines and the Caribbean. Now onto the most violent of natural disasters, of which we hear much about but rarely see on this side of the world, typhoons.
À l'ouest du Pacifique, les masses d'eau sont particulièrement chaudes. C'est là où on trouve les masses d'eau les plus chaudes sur la Terre. Et donc, c'est une région très très propice à la formation de cyclones extrêmement violents.
In this region, the heat from the surface of the ocean generates many cyclones. It produces vast amounts of evaporation, so the vapor-filled air rises quickly. This creates a low-pressure zone and suction, which generates strong winds. Above this, enormous clouds enter into the rotation. They are able to destroy anything in their wake. The Western Pacific is the birthplace of the most powerful cyclone, or rather typhoon in the world, Typhoon Haiyan. In early November 2013, it struck the Philippine coast with winds reaching 315 kilometers an hour.
On a une zone dans laquelle les cyclones peuvent se développer qui fait probablement 3-4 000 km de est-ouest et 2-3 000 km sud-nord. Comme la région est grande, les phénomènes ont beaucoup de temps pour s'intensifier et peuvent atteindre les régions côtières avec une grande intensité.
With a death toll of approximately 7,000 victims, Typhoon Haiyan is certainly the most violent typhoon ever recorded on Earth. It is not, however, the most destructive ever seen by humanity. On the 12th and 13th of November 1970, the Bola cyclone struck the coasts of Bangladesh and India. Like in Hurricane Katrina's case, the main issue was the morphology of the land. Bangladesh is particularly flat, so here the problem occurred on a much larger scale.
Le soulèvement de la mer associé à ce cyclone a noyé une partie extrêmement importante du pays sous 10 mètres d'eau. Il y a 10 mètres d'eau qui sont passés et comme les gens habitaient dans ces endroits-là, les gens étaient noyés simplement. Voilà.
The community was lacking in solid shelters and they had almost no means of prevention or communication. Overall, the number of victims is thought to lie somewhere between 200 and 500,000. It spread from the West Indies to the United States, Southeast Asia, and even the island of Réunion, as we have seen that cyclones are formed in large tropical zones around the equator. They occur at different times depending on the location. This is how the cyclonic seasons are formed.
Dans l'hémisphère nord, ça correspond à la période entre juin et novembre. Dans l'hémisphère sud, disons entre novembre et avril.
The number of cyclones is always higher towards the end of these periods. Why? Because in each hemisphere, this usually corresponds to the end of summer.
Une des particularités de l'eau de mer, ça se chauffe beaucoup plus lentement que l'air. Ça prend du temps à chauffer l'eau de mer. Donc il faut quasiment que tout l'été passe pour qu'on arrive à des températures de 26 degrés ou au-dessus. Et cette eau, une fois qu'elle a été très chaude, elle met très longtemps à se refroidir.
Cyclones appear all over the world in the tropical zones. But could cyclones perhaps be found elsewhere, for example in the north? It seems unlikely, but phenomena resembling cyclones exist in the Arctic and Antarctic waters near to the poles. They are called Arctic hurricanes or polar depressions.
Quand on regarde les images satellites, on a l'impression de voir un cyclone, alors à beaucoup plus petite échelle. Au lieu de faire parfois 500 ou 1000 km de diamètre, leur diamètre va être de 100, 200, 300 km au grand maximum, mais on a la même chose.
In the same way, there is a low pressure zone which attracts wind. The wind also draws energy from the surface of the ocean, but unlike tropical cyclones, this is rather due to a difference in temperature than a difference in humidity.
Disons que la température en elle-même, c'est pas une donnée qui suffit à elle-même. Ce qui est important de connaître, c'est la différence entre cette température, la température autour et la température en altitude.
Incredible. If seawater is normally around 0 degrees at the poles, the temperature of the winds can reach up to minus 40 degrees. Even if polar depressions seem a little less significant, they reveal a possibility for cyclones outside of the tropical zones. In fact, American coastlines have already been affected by hurricanes even in the far north. This is what happened with Hurricane Sandy in 2012.
Il était encore au stade d'ouragan quand il a touché New York, donc c'est quelque chose de complètement exceptionnel.
Hurricane Sandy was able to travel so far by sourcing its energy from the Gulf Stream, a warm marine current that runs along the American coastline. But what about Europe? In recent years, this part of the world has also experienced terrible storms. From the 26th to the 28th of December 1999, cyclones Lothar and Martin crossed a large part of the continent, moving over France, Britain, Denmark and Italy. The anemometer on top of the Eiffel Tower was stuck on its maximum wind speed, reading 216 kilometers an hour for several minutes. So are these severe climatic events similar to tropical cyclones?
Les tempêtes de 1999, ce ne sont pas des cyclones tropicaux, ce sont des tempêtes des moyennes latitudes. Et donc ces systèmes, ils ne puisent pas leur énergie dans les océans chauds de la bande tropicale.
Although they were devastating, these phenomena are unrivaled to hurricanes such as Irma or Katrina. So are cyclones impossible on the European continent? Perhaps not, it would seem, if we took a closer look at Hurricane Ophelia, a climatic event that shook Ireland and a part of England in October 2017.
Ophelia, c'est effectivement un événement remarquable puisqu'il a gardé son caractère cyclone tropical pratiquement jusqu'à l'Irlande.
The most incredible thing about Ophelia is its birthplace. It appeared on the 6th of October just off the Azores, at 30 degrees latitude near the northern limit of the tropical zone. Most cyclones originate from the southernmost point of this zone, at around 10 degrees latitude. How could it possibly have formed so high up?
La particularité, il a pu naître dans cette zone-là, il est né à la fin de la saison cyclonique parce qu'on avait des eaux très très chaudes, des eaux de plus de 2 à 3 degrés.
The summer of 2017 was a particularly warm one for the Atlantic. On the 9th of October, Ophelia appears quite far up north. Incredibly, while most cyclones formed in the southern hemisphere moved from east to west, Ophelia moved straight towards the northeast. Why? Once again, it is because the storm was formed much further north than all the others and was snapped up by what scientists call the jet stream.
Le courant G, en fait, c'est des vents qui soufflent d'ouest en est au niveau des moyennes latitudes. C'est des vents assez forts.
This powerful jet stream quickly propels Ophelia in the direction of Europe. On the 9th of October, the phenomenon is classed as a depression and then as a tropical storm. On the 11th, it officially becomes a hurricane. The following day, the depression is downgraded to a standard storm. It crosses Ireland and Scotland and then gets weaker as it heads towards Norway. In spite of the 3 deaths and the millions of pounds worth of damage Ophelia caused, the phenomenon was still fairly limited, far removed from Irma or Katrina severity. Even so, Ophelia opens a debate about the evolution of cyclones. With climate change becoming a major factor, what will happen in the future? Will there be more cyclones? And will they become progressively more destructive? Scientists can only bring partial answers to these questions. Almost all the data they have is very recent.
40-50 ans de données d'observation des cyclones, ça nous aide à mieux comprendre comment fonctionnent les cyclones. Mais ça n'est pas suffisant pour pouvoir faire des projections sur, dans les 100 ans ou les 50 ans qui viennent, qu'est-ce qui va se passer.
Since the 70s, satellites and many other technologies such as American research planes have allowed us to learn much more about these phenomena.
Aujourd'hui, lorsqu'il y a un cyclone qui se dirige vers les Caraïbes, vous avez les avions américains qui vont dans le cyclone faire des mesures, comme ça on connaît bien la force des vents qu'il y a dedans.
These amazing technologies help to calculate the power of the phenomenon before it causes any damage. However, researchers still do not know how to accurately predict the birth of a cyclone and its subsequent trajectory.
Certains cyclones, on les prévoit très bien à l'avance. D'autres, c'est beaucoup plus difficile parce qu'ils sont complètement erratiques.
In the long term, it is very difficult to draw any proper conclusions. However, there are definite trends emerging, such as the geographical distribution of these phenomena. As we have seen, cyclones appear and develop within the Earth's tropical zones, and recent studies have shown that this zone could evolve.
La bande tropicale a tendance à s'étendre en latitude. En gros, les tropiques remontent vers le nord. Donc les cyclones vont être entraînés dans ce mouvement général et avoir des intensités fortes encore plus vers le nord.
Just like Ophelia, more cyclones will appear in the north over the next few decades. Although these findings are still to be debated, this trend is far from reassuring. And if anything, the cyclones' increase in violence is a key indicator that the number of phenomena is only going to grow.
On a des arguments qui viennent des lois de la physique. Plus il fait chaud dans l'atmosphère, plus l'atmosphère peut contenir d'eau, de vapeur d'eau. Donc lorsque ça précipite plus fort, donc plus de dégâts. Même si on avait des cyclones de même intensité, on aurait plus de dégâts.
Cyclones. Whether we call them hurricanes or typhoons, these incredible weather phenomena can reach gigantic proportions. They can be larger than France and harbour winds faster than 300 kilometers an hour. They can tear houses apart and provoke waves of more than 10 meters in height. These wind monsters kill thousands of people every year and cause billions worth of damage. Some scientists fear that the cyclones of the future will be even more destructive. What we tend to ignore is that cyclones play an important role in nature, particularly in the regulation of the climate. By drawing warm water out of the ocean and sending it back in the form of cold precipitation, cyclones help to check the ocean's temperatures. But that's not all.
Les cyclones font partie des catastrophes naturelles. Il ne faut pas l'oublier, c'est-à-dire que ces dégâts, les écosystèmes, donc la végétation, la faune, ils sont habitués, ils sont dans cet équilibre avec les cyclones.
Climate change has also changed the nature of cyclones. The natural balance has been broken. But to what extent? And what are the consequences? Scientists have taken on the challenge of finding the answers.